Welcome to the first paradox. This one is Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles can never overtake a tortoise ahead of him because he must first reach where the tortoise was. But by then, the tortoise has moved forward. Achilles, the fastest runner in ancient myth, challenges a tortoise to a race. To be fair, he gives the tortoise a head start. Let's say the tortoise begins 100 meters ahead. Achilles begins to run. He quickly reaches the spot where the tortoise started, but the tortoise is no longer there. It has moved forward, just a little. Achilles runs again to where the tortoise has now gone. But again, the tortoise has crept ahead. This goes on forever. No matter how fast Achilles runs, the tortoise is always a step ahead. He must always first arrive where the tortoise was, not where it is. Each time he reaches that spot, the tortoise has moved. It seems he can never overtake it. This is not a problem of speed. Achilles is faster. That's not in question. The paradox lies in the steps, the infinite number of steps Achilles must take. First, reach point A, then point B, then point C, on and on, each point getting closer to the tortoise's trail. The distance he needs to cover shrinks, yes, but it never vanishes. There's always one more point between him and the tortoise. A smaller gap, but still a gap. That's the trap. Now think this way. Imagine time chopped into little pieces. Every piece of time holds one piece of Achilles' motion and one of the tortoise's. The tortoise always moves in the time Achilles takes to reach his last position. Even if the tortoise moves just a centimeter, that centimeter lies ahead. Achilles must cover it, then another, and another. The path never ends, not physically, but logically. This is motion sliced too thin. It becomes stuck in the slices. Time, broken into parts, won't move forward. It stretches out, endlessly, even though the total time may be short. The paradox says, however small the step, there is another step before it ends. Motion seems continuous, but the logic here traps it in fragments. 1,000,000 tasks in a minute. Each must be done. Yet if there are infinite tasks, can they all be done in any time? The more you break it down, the worse it gets. You want Achilles to win. You know he should, but logic says no. Logic says there's always one more moment, one more space, no catching up, no passing, just chasing a ghost that keeps moving a breath ahead. The tortoise becomes a shadow stretched by reason. We are not talking about real turtles. We are talking about how thought can turn certainty into a maze. Achilles runs in the world, but the paradox lives in the mind. It doesn't care about how fast, only how many. And infinity is not a number. It is a mirror with no end. When Achilles looks into it, he sees no finish line. What is strange is that the total time Achilles needs to overtake the tortoise is finite. You can add the times and distances and get a final answer. But the paradox refuses this. It doesn't care about the answer. It cares about the steps. And there are too many. In fact, there is no last step where Achilles passes the tortoise. For every step, the tortoise has moved on. So when does he pass? Never, by this logic. It's like saying, to get there, you must first go halfway. And to go halfway, you must go halfway to halfway. That never ends. So by that rule, you never even start. Motion itself becomes impossible. But we move all the time. So the paradox is not about motion in the world. It is about the logic we use to explain it. When reason slices reality too thin, it eats itself. Now think of Achilles frozen, halfway to halfway, in every moment. The tortoise glides forward, not quickly, but constantly. Achilles keeps pausing, not physically, but logically. He is trapped in the sequence, like a clock that never ticks, because there is always another tick between ticks. He stands still, running. This is the heart of the paradox. Thought splits time and space into pieces so small they become infinite. Then it asks, how can you cross infinity in finite time? And it answers, "You can't." So the runner never runs. The fast stays behind, the slow stays ahead, not because of speed, but because of how the mind counts. You might say, but in real life, Achilles catches the tortoise. True, but this is not real life. This is a test of how we think. The paradox is a mirror held to logic, and logic in this mirror stutters. It says, each step is needed, but there are too many steps, so nothing moves, even when everything moves. The tortoise wins, not by speed, but by logic, not because it runs, but because thought runs in circles. Achilles runs on the ground, but reason runs in loops, and in this loop, forward means never quite there. Close means not close enough. The tortoise becomes a symbol, not of slowness, but of something forever just ahead, an idea that slips away every time you try to catch it. Even when you shorten the gap, it stretches. Even when you shrink the time, the steps grow. You divide and divide, hoping to reach the end. But division has no end. That's the trap. Achilles loses not to a turtle, but to the shape of thought itself. The paradox whispers, speed doesn't matter, size doesn't matter. What matters is that thought creates a world where completion is impossible, where a simple race becomes a riddle, where a man who should win cannot. Because to win, he must do the impossible, complete an infinite number of tasks, each after the other, with no last one to finish. This is not about turtles. It is about the limits of logic when it tries to handle motion, change, and time. The paradox turns reason against itself. The runner cannot run. The gap never closes. The tortoise forever ahead. And that is how the slow defeats the fast. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is the arrow paradox. If an arrow is motionless at each instant in time, how can it be moving at all? Time is made of moments, instants, tiny frozen points. Take any moment, not a second, not a blink, just one pure, still slice of time. In that moment, the arrow is not moving. It is in one place, not many. It is not in two places at once. It is not stretching. It is not flying. It is just there, hanging in space, caught in the silence of that instant. It does not move. It cannot move. For in a single moment, there is no before, no after. There is only now. Now look again. Take another instant. A different now. The arrow is still there, still not moving. The same as before. A third instant, still. A fourth, still. You can take as many moments as you like, as many as you can imagine. You will never catch the arrow in motion. In each moment, it stands still. So then, what is motion? If at every point the arrow does not move, how is there ever movement? Motion, we say, is a change over time. But what is time made of? If it is made of moments, and each moment has no motion in it, then where does motion come from? The arrow does not leap between instants. There is no leap. There is only stillness after stillness after stillness, like frames in a film. Each frame is fixed. The arrow never moves inside a frame. Yet when you play them fast, it looks like motion. But where is the motion? Is it in the arrow, or is it in the mind? Now take the arrow's flight and stretch it flat across time. Line up every frozen moment side by side. You see the arrow's path, from bow to target. But each step on that path is a statue, a still, silent image. Not one contains movement. If motion is not in the parts, then how can it be in the whole? You cannot add zero movement again and again and get motion. 0 times anything is still 0. So the paradox asks, is motion an illusion? Is it something we imagine, not something real? Because at every point we can look, truly look, we see nothing move. If reality is what happens in moments, and moments do not move, then nothing moves. We only believe in motion because we cannot stop time with our eyes, but reason can, and when it does, It sees the arrow as it truly is, frozen. You may say, "But I see the arrow fly." Yes, your senses tell you that, but the paradox says your senses lie. They blur the frozen moments together and call it movement, but each instant is complete. Nothing changes in it, nothing flows in it. The arrow is where it is, not coming from anywhere, not going anywhere, just there. And if every moment is like that, then when does the arrow actually move? Motion requires change. Change requires time, but each moment has no time. It is timeless. If the world is made of such slices, then change cannot live in them. The arrow never moves because there is no room for movement in a single instant. It has position, it has shape, it has no velocity. That comes from comparing two positions, but the moment has only one. So is motion just a trick of comparison? If so, then motion is not something real in the world. It is something we invent between snapshots. It exists only between the lines. But if everything that exists must exist at some time, and time is made of still moments, then motion exists at no time. And if it exists at no time, then when does it exist? The paradox does not care about what we see. It cares about what must be. It says, if the arrow is ever to move, it must move in time, not between time. But no motion is found in any instant. So what kind of thing is motion? Not a thing in time, not a thing in space. A ghost, maybe. A story we tell when the light flickers fast enough. The arrow is always still, and yet the arrow is not still. That is the contradiction. We say it flies, but when we look, really look, it freezes. Each piece is lifeless, but the whole feels alive, like a song made of notes that do not sing, like a fire made of cold sparks. The arrow is never caught in flight, only imagined in flight, and that imagining is not a thing the arrow does. It is what we do. Can the world move if its pieces do not? Can time flow if each moment is a rock in the riverbed? The paradox whispers, no, movement is not in the world. It is in the stitching of the world, not in what is, but in what isn't. In the gap between frames, the crack between clocks, not in the arrow, but in the silence between its positions. So the arrow moves only when you do not look. The moment you freeze it, it is still. The more carefully you watch, the less it moves, until at last it stands still forever, hanging mid-air, balanced between a place and a place, caught in the lie of motion. Then what is speed? What is velocity? These are ratios, measures, tricks of numbers. They speak of how far in how long, but they do not explain how something that is always still can become something that goes. The paradox doesn't deny distance. It denies going. It denies the leap from place to place. It denies the bridge between stillness and stillness. So maybe there is no arrow, no flight, no arc, just a set of points, a trail of dots, a map, not a journey. The arrow has no motion. It just has positions, and we draw a line through them. But lines are ideas. They are not part of the arrow. They are ours. If the arrow has no movement in itself, then movement is not part of reality. It is part of thought. And if that is true, then we never move. We only believe we do. Our bodies shift, yes, but if every shift is a still image, then we are made of stillness. Living statues dreaming we are in flight. Hearts that beat one still moment at a time, never in motion, only in sequence. So the arrow never flew. It was always only, ever still, in every moment. And motion, that was never the arrow's to give. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is the Dichotomy Paradox. Before reaching a point, one must reach the halfway point, and before that, another halfway point, creating infinite steps. To go from here to there, you must first go halfway. That seems simple, but halfway is not the whole way. Once you reach halfway, you must go halfway again, from halfway to the end. But that new half is still a part of something larger. So again, before you reach it, you must go halfway to that halfway, and before that, halfway to the halfway to the halfway, on and on. Before you ever reach the end, you are trapped in a chain of halves that never ends. This is the paradox. Motion requires reaching a goal, but reaching it means passing through infinite smaller goals. How can you finish something that needs infinite steps? Even if each step gets smaller, they never stop. Each new goal is smaller than the last, but still there, still something to reach before the next. There is no first step. Every step has a step before it. So where do you begin? To reach the wall across the room, you must go halfway. But to go halfway, you must go a quarter. To go a quarter, you must go an eighth. Every attempt to move begins with an infinite list of smaller moves. Each one must happen before the next. You cannot jump over them. They are not optional. Each must be done. But how can you do infinite things in a finite time? Even though the total distance is short, even though your body can clearly cross it, the paradox traps you in the logic of division. It does not care about what is possible physically. It cares about what is required logically. And logic says, you must complete an infinite series of acts, not one more, not one less, all of them, and infinity cannot be done. The steps shrink, yes, but the number of steps does not. They stack endlessly, each one needed before the next. It is not a matter of effort, it is a matter of structure. The path is built from an infinite staircase. No matter how fast you climb, you are always climbing, always one more rung. And so motion seems to collapse. It becomes impossible, not because we lack strength, but because we lack a starting point. If every beginning has a prior beginning, where does it start? There is no first move, only a series with no bottom, like trying to walk across sand that becomes finer and finer until it is dust, then mist, then nothing. There is no solid place to step. Even if you do begin somehow, you face another wall. You must cross the second half, then the quarter left, then the eighth. Even after moving through all the earlier halves, you are still not there. Always another segment left. Always one more piece to take before arriving. The goal keeps breaking apart as you approach. You can never touch it. It always turns into something smaller before you reach. It is like chasing a line that keeps dividing as you run. You reach out, and the end splits in 2, then 4, then 8. You never reach the end, because every end is made of more middle. The closer you get, the more steps appear. The path stretches forever, not in length, but in layers. You are stuck in depth, not distance. This paradox does not say the goal is far. It says the steps are endless. It is not the size of the road, but the number of tiles. You may walk 10 feet, but the paradox says, to do so, you must take an infinite number of tiny moves. You must move through infinity in a blink. But infinity does not shrink just because your steps do. Some say, the sum of the steps is finite. Add them, half plus quarter plus eighth, and so on, and you get 1. So what's the problem? The problem is that you must still do the infinite steps. The total may be small, but the count is infinite. The pieces add up, yes, but the number of pieces never ends. Doing infinity is not the same as summing it. So the paradox divides space until space has no meaning. It takes the journey and replaces it with tasks, not distance, but duties, not going forward, but checking boxes. And there are too many boxes to check. Even if they get smaller, even if they seem quick, they never stop needing to be done. You cannot skip steps. Skipping halfway means you didn't do what logic demands. Skipping makes motion false. You didn't get to the end. You jumped, and the paradox does not allow that. You must go through each point, not leap past. Each halfway must be passed before the next. That is the rule. That is the trap. So what is movement, really? Is it an illusion of completion over chaos? A fiction that covers an infinite pattern? We see motion as smooth, but maybe it is not. Maybe it is stitched together from fragments so small we cannot feel them. Maybe motion is not one act, but a trick of infinite acts, pretending to be one. The paradox doesn't care what we see. It doesn't care if we reach the door, the wall, the other side. It only asks, what must happen for you to get there? And the answer is, too much. More than can happen. An infinite ladder must be climbed, not long but endless, not wide but bottomless. This is the heart of the paradox. The task is short, but it is made of infinite tasks. The road is near, but it is made of infinite stones. And so, even the shortest journey cannot begin, not because it is hard, but because it cannot start. It has no true beginning, only pieces before pieces before pieces. So the closer you get, the farther you are. Every approach reveals another divide. Every progress is partial. Every point hides another. The end is not a place. It is a mirage that shrinks when you walk, a finish line that keeps cutting itself in half, not moving away, just multiplying barriers. The paradox does not live in the world. It lives in the thinking, in the slicing of reality into rules that betray experience. We move, we arrive, we touch. But the logic says we cannot. The logic says we must do the impossible, complete the uncompletable, cross the uncrossable, reach the unreached. And so we are left walking, always, toward a line that never truly ends. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is the stadium paradox. Equal bodies pass each other at equal speeds, but appear to take different times depending on perspective, challenging assumptions of relative motion. Imagine a stadium. In this stadium, 3 rows of bodies line up. Row A is still. Row B moves to the right. Row C moves to the left. All the bodies in each row are the same length. Row B and row C move at the same speed, but in opposite directions. From the point of view of row A, row B and row C pass by at the same pace. Everything seems balanced. But when you shift the view to one of the moving rows, things start to break. Look from row B. As it passes row A, the bodies of row A move backward from B's view. At the same time, row C is also moving toward B. Double speed now, because both B and C are moving at equal speed in opposite directions. From B's view, the bodies in row C are moving past twice as fast as those in row A. So, row C seems to pass row B completely in half the time it takes row A to do the same. But row C and row A are made of the same number of bodies, same size, same spacing. How can C pass B faster than A does if they're the same length? How can less time be needed to pass the same number of things? This is the paradox. Equal things, moving at equal speeds in opposite directions, produce unequal results. Time stretches or shrinks depending on who watches. One view says 2 rows pass in the same time. Another view says one takes twice as long. But the objects are the same. The motion is the same. Only the view is different. So what is true? Is time something solid or something that shifts? The paradox pulls at this question. It says, if motion is relative, then time must also be relative. But we expect time to stay steady. We expect that if 2 lines pass each other, they will agree on how long it takes. But here they don't. The view from the still row and the view from the moving row produce different answers, and both are using the same logic. From the middle row's view, the bodies of the row moving opposite should take less time to pass. They appear faster, but they are the same size. They move the same speed, just opposite direction. They should pass each other in the same time as the still row, but they don't. The numbers don't match, and yet The logic is clean. Each step makes sense until you compare them. So where is the mistake? Is it in the math, the motion, or the mind? If everything moves in straight lines, if the bodies are equal and the speeds are matched, then how can two truths exist? One truth says, row C passed in this time. Another says, no, it passed in half that time. Both use reasoning. Both start with equal bodies and equal speeds, but the outcomes disagree. And if logic can give two answers, which one do we trust? It seems like a small thing, a shift in view, but the Dichotomy Paradox shows that even a small shift breaks the idea of fixed motion. It challenges the core of how we think about time and movement. We expect reality to stay still while we move around it. But here, reality bends when you change your point of view. The rules ripple. You want to measure. You want to say, this took this long. But the paradox says, from where? From whom? Because each watcher sees something different, and each one is right. That's the trap. You don't have disagreement between right and wrong. You have disagreement between two rights. That's the paradox. It makes you ask, what is motion if its truth changes depending on who watches? If time can shrink or grow just by looking at it from a different seat, is it real at all? Or is it just a shadow we cast on the world? The paradox says, maybe motion is not a thing. Maybe it is only a relationship. You are never just moving. You are always moving relative to something else. And when that something else moves too, the story changes. Even if everything is equal, balance becomes illusion. Two equal rows, passing equally in equal parts, but one takes twice as long. How? Not by changing speed, not by changing length, just by changing the observer. One truth becomes two, and the space between them cannot be fixed. The paradox does not break the world. It breaks the thinking. It cuts into our trust in sameness. We believe equal things should behave equally, but here they don't. Logic says they should, but logic also says they don't. The contradiction is not in the objects, it's in the view. It tells us perspective matters more than we think, not just in feelings or thoughts, but in facts, in how things move, in how time flows. The stadium becomes a mirror, showing us that reality is not one picture. It is many pictures, layered and clashing. The still row sees one world, the moving row sees another, and both cannot be made to match. So we are left spinning, equal bodies, equal speeds, different times, no answer that fits them all. Just a fracture, hidden in the ordinary. Motion breaks when you look too closely. Time slips when you ask too much. And the paradox waits at the center, quiet, impossible, true. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is the moving rows paradox. When objects move past each other at the same speed in opposite directions, how can their observed speeds double? Imagine two rows of bodies perfectly lined up, equal in size and spacing. One row moves to the right, the other to the left. Both move at the same speed, like mirrors of each other. They begin side by side, body next to body, and then they start to slide past each other. From the ground, it all looks normal. One line goes left, one line goes right. But something strange happens when you ask, how fast do they appear to pass each other? The moment one body in the left moving row passes a body in the right moving row, the speed at which they appear to meet is faster than either of their actual speeds. Each is moving at speed x, but they pass each other at speed 2x. This is the strange part. How can motion that is equal and opposite create something more? If one row moves at 10 and the other at 10, why do they meet as if at 20? You think of motion as a number. You want to add them. You say, they approach each other, so their speeds combine. But the paradox asks, why? Why should two equal motions create a result that is not equal? Where does the extra speed come from? Nothing is moving faster than it was. Yet the meeting point, the crossing, is happening faster than either row moves on its own. Now flip the view. Stand on one of the moving rows. From this place, you feel still. The other row is rushing toward you, but it's not just moving at speed x, it's coming at you at speed 2x. It feels faster than you ever moved. You didn't change speed, but the world did. And that's the problem. You didn't speed up, but from your view, the other row did. That is the paradox. Equal speed, opposite direction, equal rows. Yet a doubling effect. Not a trick of numbers, but a twist of logic. If nothing is going faster than before, how can the result be faster? Motion seems simple, distance over time. But here, motion splits. It reflects. It builds more from what was equal. The paradox sits in the meeting points. Each body in one row meets a body in the other row twice as quickly as it would if the other row were still. You cannot slow that down. You cannot explain it away. The numbers insist. One body passes the entire other row in half the time it would take if that row were at rest. But both are moving the same. Nothing is gaining speed. Nothing is cheating. Yet everything speeds up from the view of the other. This makes motion slippery. No longer one solid thing. No longer something you just measure. It bends with view. One speed turns into two speeds. One direction splits into two experiences. What is true from the ground is not true from the row. The paradox cracks the idea of shared motion. So what is speed? Is it a thing you own, or is it a thing others give you? If you say, I am moving at 10, the paradox replies, from where? Because from your spot, nothing moves. But from someone else's, everything does. And sometimes it moves faster than it should, even when nothing changed. Now try to find the truth. You want one answer. You want to say, this row moves at this speed, the other at that speed, and that's it. But the moment you try to compare them, you lose the single truth. Each view gives you a different story. One row sees the other as moving twice as fast, but they are the same. They are doing the same thing. So why is the other row breaking the rule? It gets worse when you realize that both rows feel the same. Each thinks, I am still. The other is moving. That cannot be. They cannot both be still, but in their own world, they are. And both think the other is going twice as fast. That also cannot be, but it is. That's the paradox. Nothing changed. The world did not shift, but the view did, and with it, the truth. Speeds doubled without acceleration, time warped without bending, all from switching seats. The paradox does not lie in the bodies. It lies in the eyes watching them. What does this mean for motion? That it's not a thing you carry with you. It's a thing that depends on where you stand. Two people doing the same thing at the same speed will still disagree on what the other is doing. Not because they are wrong, but because they are looking from different places. And if two truths are both right, but different, what happens to truth itself? Now think again. Two rows pass each other. Every body in row A passes every body in row B in a burst. The crossings happen faster than they should. The passing is too quick, but nothing moved faster. Still, the result is as if everything did. You cannot stop this doubling. It is built into the logic of motion, and yet it makes no sense. The paradox presses this idea that motion, even simple motion, refuses to stay still. That comparison bends speed. That opposites, when seen together, create more than their parts. The moving rows teach you that speed is not fixed. It grows when viewed across gaps. It doubles when reflections meet. And yet no one went faster. It is not an illusion. It is not a mistake. It is a fact of perspective. But that makes it no less disturbing, because it means the world looks different depending on where you are, not in color or shape, but in timing and movement. In truth, so the paradox stays: 2 rows, 2 speeds, 2 views, and from those views, a doubling, not in body, not in effort, but in experience. Speed becomes fluid, time becomes uncertain, and the space between things becomes charged with contradiction. What you thought was equal becomes unequal. What you thought was shared becomes separate. The moving rows reveal the crack between what is and what is seen, and in that crack, speed doubles, even when nothing moves more than it did. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Hilbert's hotel, ancient form. If the cosmos is infinite, how can it be full? And how can anything be added to what already contains everything? Picture a hotel that has infinite rooms, not many, not countless, truly infinite, no end. Every room is numbered, room 1, room 2, room 3, and on without stopping, and every room is full. Every guest has checked in. Not one room is empty. Now imagine someone new arrives and wants a room. You might say, "Sorry, we are full." But this is an infinite hotel. And so, the manager smiles and says, "Of course we have room." He tells every guest to move 1 room over. Guest in room 1 moves to room 2. Guest in room 2 moves to room 3. Guest in room 3 to room 4. And so on. Since there's no last room, every guest can shift. Room 1 becomes empty. The new guest checks in. No one leaves. Nothing is lost. A full hotel just made more space. How is that possible? How can something already full still have room? If every room was taken, how did a new room appear? It is not about stretching the walls or building more rooms. It's about how infinity behaves. You can shift it, rearrange it, add to it, and it remains the same. Infinity is never full, even when it is. The paradox deepens. Imagine now that a bus arrives, not with 1 guest, but with infinite guests, each needing a room. Again, the manager nods. We can take them all. He tells each current guest to move to a room double their own number. Room 1 goes to room 2, room 2 to room 4, room 3 to room 6. Now every even-numbered room is filled, and every odd-numbered room is free, infinite in number. The new infinite guests go into those. Now the hotel is full again. It was full before. It took in infinite more, and it is still full. But what is fullness if you can keep adding to it forever? And what is space if there is always more? The paradox whispers, fullness and emptiness no longer mean what you thought. Now imagine another bus arrives, this time infinite buses, each with infinite guests. You might laugh, surely now there is no space. But the hotel smiles again. The manager says, "We'll use math." He gives each guest a unique number, a formula, a method. Every guest from every bus gets a room. No one is left out. Infinity accepts infinity many times over, and still, it has room. But how? If the cosmos is infinite, how can anything be outside it? And if it contains everything, how can it contain more? And if it can contain more, was it ever truly full? The hotel is not broken. It is perfect, but it breaks your understanding. You cannot use common sense. In the finite world, full means no more. Additions mean overflow, but in the infinite, full does not stop adding. Completion never closes the door. More can always be fitted in. The paradox says, in infinity, the part is as large as the whole. That's the trouble. In a finite hotel, room 1 is just 1 room. But in this hotel, the number of even rooms is the same as all the rooms. So is the number of odd rooms. So is the number of rooms that are multiples of 3. You can carve infinity into infinite pieces, and each piece is still infinite. Subtract an infinity, and you still have infinity. Add an infinity, and nothing changes. Infinity bends the rules. So what is size if pieces can be equal to the whole? What is fullness if subtraction leaves no less? What is addition if adding does not grow? Hilbert's hotel is not about guests or buildings. It is about the way logic falters when it touches the infinite. It is about the line where numbers stop behaving. The ancient mind asked, if the cosmos has no end, where is there space to put more? And if it already contains all there is, what is left to be added? If you can always add more stars, more worlds, more thoughts, then what does it mean for something to be complete? Infinity never arrives. It is always becoming, never being. So how can the cosmos be called full if fullness has no meaning here? And if it can never be full, what does that make it? Always open, always growing, or already everything? You can say it is finished, but it keeps taking more. You can say it is boundless, but that does not mean empty. It is the hotel with no limits, no need to say no, no wall to stop the next thing from coming. Now ask, where does new go if all places already exist? Where does addition fit if there is no lack? The paradox presses, infinity does not block more, it invites more, it absorbs more, it stays unchanged while changing. But then what is change? What is growth? If infinity can grow yet never be greater, what is difference if each step forward returns you to the same place, still infinite, still unfilled, still open? Every addition disappears into the endless. Nothing piles up, nothing spills out. The cosmos stretches and shrinks and stays whole. This makes fullness a shadow. It makes completeness an illusion. It makes the idea of no more into nonsense, because more always fits, more always comes, and yet the total does not change. The paradox is not about the hotel. It is about the mind trying to count what cannot be counted. You want to measure, but infinity will not sit still. You want to hold it in your hands, but it slips. You want it to behave like numbers, but it isn't a number. It is a horizon, and when you walk toward it, it moves. The ancient form of Hilbert's hotel is not just about rooms. It is about the infinite structure of being, about whether the universe is a finished thing or a thing that keeps swallowing additions without limit. If it contains everything, what is left to be? If nothing is left to be, why does more still arrive? The paradox ends where logic ends, where reason walks up to the door, knocks, and finds it always opens, no matter how many are already inside. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is the heap, Sorites paradox. If removing one grain of sand doesn't stop a heap from being a heap, when exactly does it stop being one? Begin with a heap, a true heap, a pile of sand, high and clear, no doubt about it. You see it and you say, that is a heap. Now remove a single grain, just one. The heap remains. Nothing has changed, not really. It still looks like a heap. It still feels like a heap. One grain cannot make a difference. That would be absurd. Now remove another grain. Still a heap. Then another. Still a heap. Again, again, again. Each time you remove a single grain, and each time you say, this is still a heap, and you're not wrong. One grain is too small to change anything, but you keep going. Grain by grain, always just one, never more. At some point the pile is small, low, thin. You hesitate. Is this still a heap? Maybe, maybe not. You keep going. More grains removed, until there are just a few, until there are two, then one, then none. Now you clearly have no heap. But when did it stop? Where is the line? Was it when only 10 grains were left, 20, 100? Or was it already not a heap far earlier? The paradox is this: if one grain cannot change a heap into a non-heap, then no number of single grains can, because each single step is harmless. But the total result is a contradiction. You start with a heap. You take away one grain at a time, each time thinking nothing important happened. Yet, in the end, you have nothing, and nothing is not a heap. So logic breaks. It tells you that small changes do not matter, but together they do. It says no step breaks the heap. Yet the heap breaks, not all at once, but piece by piece, invisibly, slowly, silently, until what was once certain becomes uncertain, and what was once a heap becomes a handful, and then less. Now try the reverse. Begin with 1 grain of sand, clearly not a heap. Add another, still not a heap. Another, still no, again and again. Each addition is tiny. Each feels meaningless. You tell yourself, 1 more grain cannot make a heap. But at some point, you look, and something is there. Something more than a small pile. Something that looks like a heap. So now you ask, when did it begin? When did the not heap become the heap? Was it at 100 grains, 200, 1,000? But there is no clear point, no boundary, no moment when it flipped. It just shifted, gradually, with no warning. And now you're holding a paradox, the heap that never arrived but is here anyway. The paradox traps you in the vagueness of words. Heap is a word, a soft word, a fuzzy idea. It has no sharp edge, and logic hates soft edges. Logic wants lines, yes or no, heap or not heap. But the world is not made of clean lines. It is made of slow turns, quiet transitions, small changes that build into big ones. So you are caught. You want to say, removing 1 grain does nothing. That seems true. But then you remove 1,000 grains, one by one, and everything changes. And you still think, each step did nothing. But the sum of nothings became something. That should not be possible, but it is. You want to draw a line. You want to say, here, this number is the border. But wherever you draw the line, it feels wrong. Because if 10,001 grains is a heap, why not 10,000? And if 10,000 is a heap, why not 9,999? There is no number that seems special enough to be the turning point. Every number has a neighbor. No number stands alone. That is the wound inside the paradox. The failure to name the moment, the absence of the cutoff, the idea that big changes come from small changes, but no small change is big enough. So how do you explain the change at all? If nothing ever changes enough, why does everything change? This is not just about sand, it's about categories, about how we name things. When does a person become bald? When does a child become an adult? When does night become day? The same rule applies. Take a little away or add a little more. And everything is different, even though nothing at any step was different enough. You live with these blurred edges every day. You speak with them, you think with them, you believe in them. But when you press them with logic, they crumble, because logic wants certainty, but life gives you gray. So the paradox becomes a mirror. It shows you how much your thinking depends on words that have no weight. It shows you how your rules fall apart when they meet the gradual. It shows you how the impossible sneaks in, grain by grain. It also whispers a deeper fear, that change cannot be trusted, that the biggest shifts come from steps too small to see, that the ground moves without warning, not with a quake, but with soft drifting, that everything solid is only solid until it is not. You may want to fix it. You may say, let's define a heap, let's give it a number. But the moment you do, someone will ask, why that number? And you will not have an answer. You chose it to stop the drift, but the drift laughs at borders. It flows around them, over them, through them. So maybe there is no answer. Maybe the heap is not one thing. Maybe it is many things pretending to be one. Maybe the paradox is not a puzzle to solve, but a crack to see through, a crack in how we name, how we sort, how we think. And maybe that's the point. Not to fix the heap, but to realize the heap never was fixed. It was always shifting, always becoming, always on the edge of something else. You thought you had a pile of sand, but you had a process, a tide, a blur. One grain does nothing, but one grain, again and again, becomes everything. That is the paradox. That is the quiet noise of change. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Plato's infinite recollection. If learning is remembering and knowledge is eternal, how can we claim ignorance of anything? You say you do not know, you say you are ignorant, but then you learn. And when you learn, you say, now I understand. But what if learning is not discovering something new? What if learning is only remembering what you already knew? That is what Plato says. The soul has seen everything before, in some other time, in some other place. All knowledge is already within you. Learning is not gaining, it is uncovering, remembering. If this is true, then how can anyone say, I do not know? How can you be ignorant of what you already possess? If the knowledge is in you, if it always has been, then why must you search for it? If the truth is already yours, how can you ask for it? Plato says the soul is eternal. It has lived before. It has seen the forms, the pure ideas, beauty itself, justice itself, truth itself. It has touched the eternal things. But when it enters the body, it forgets. The body is heavy. It clouds the memory, so the soul must struggle to remember. It sees shadows of what it once knew, and from these shadows, it tries to recall the light. But if all knowledge is recollection, then there can be no true ignorance, only forgetfulness, only sleep. You are not without truth, you are only not awake to it. Yet this raises the paradox. If all truth is within, why do we not know it? Why is remembering so hard, so rare, so unclear? You say, I learned geometry, but Plato says you remembered it. You say, I learned virtue, but Plato says you recollected it. All discovery is recovery. All insight is return. But if you already had it, why did you lose it? And if you lost it, how can you be sure it was ever truly known? This turns knowledge into a circle, then forget, then know again. But if forgetting is possible, then knowledge is not always active. If knowledge sleeps, is it truly knowledge? Can a thing be yours if you cannot use it, cannot touch it, cannot even remember that you had it? Now think of a child. The child does not know language or math or law. But the paradox says the child's soul has seen the eternal things. The child has met the idea of number, has met the idea of harmony. So when the child learns, it is not new, it is old truth returning. But if this is so, then how do we explain confusion? How do we explain error? If truth is within, why do we cling to lies? Why do we stumble in the dark? The paradox tightens. If the soul has seen the truth, then it should be drawn to it. But we resist it. We run from it. We love opinion, not wisdom. We chase noise, not form. And yet, when we finally hear truth, real truth, something in us says, yes, something remembers. But if something remembers, why did it forget in the first place? And deeper still, if all learning is recollection, then teaching becomes strange. A teacher cannot give knowledge. The teacher only helps the student recall. But if that is true, then the teacher is not giving, only guiding. The student is not receiving, only remembering. And if remembering is all there is, then why do some remember more than others? Why do some never remember at all? You might say, because some souls have forgotten more deeply. But that answer leads to another paradox. If forgetting can be so deep that it blocks all memory, is the knowledge still in you? Is it yours if it cannot rise? Or has it been lost? And if lost, then knowledge is not eternal. It is fragile. Or maybe it is not the knowledge that is fragile. Maybe it is the soul. Maybe the soul is cracked. Maybe the fall into the body was too hard. And now the truth is buried too deep to find. But if that's the case, then can we say all people carry the same knowledge? Or is there a limit to recollection? If someone never remembers, never recalls even a glimpse, are they ignorant or are they broken? And if broken, then the soul is not perfect. But Plato says it is. So which is it? Is the soul a perfect mirror of eternal truth, or a foggy glass that forgets its own face? The paradox presses on. If knowledge is eternal, then time cannot touch it. But recollection happens in time. You remember today what you forgot yesterday. But if what you remembered was always known, then why did time matter at all? Why delay the return of the truth? Why not remember everything at once? Maybe because the body is a prison. Plato says so. The soul is trapped, distracted, poisoned by senses. But if the soul is divine, how can it be trapped? How can it be fooled? A divine thing should not be weak. But the paradox says it is. It says the most perfect part of us forgets the most perfect truths, and then stumbles slowly back to them. And so we walk around claiming we do not know. We build schools, write books, teach lessons. But if Plato is right, none of this gives knowledge. It only shakes memory. It only points inward. You do not learn truth from others. You remember it from yourself. But that makes every question strange. You are asking for what you already have. You are seeking your own reflection and calling it foreign. So why do we feel ignorant? Why do we beg for truth? Why do we search at all if everything has already been seen? Because the memory is thin, the truth is veiled, the eternal is faint. You are a creature of recollection walking in a world of forgetting. You know, but you do not know that you know. That is the paradox. The soul holds the whole sky, the eternal forms, the divine patterns, but it cannot always look up. It forgets. It dreams. It stares at shadows. And then, sometimes, a moment of learning comes, a flash, a return, a glimpse of something old, and you say, I understand. But what you really mean is, I remember. So the paradox remains. If all knowledge is eternal and already within us, why are we so full of ignorance? And if truth belongs to us from the beginning, why must we struggle to reclaim it? Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Anaximander's Boundless. If the universe is infinite and eternal, how can it change without a beginning or an end? The universe, Anaximander said, is boundless. It has no edge, no limit, no outside. It is not shaped by borders. It is not held by time. It has no start and no finish. It simply is. Always, endlessly, without foundation and without goal. And in this boundless, change happens. The stars shift, the worlds turn, life rises and falls. But how can change exist inside something that has no beginning and no end? All change seems to need time. Time needs a before and an after. But what is before if there is no start? What is after if there is no end? The paradox opens. How does something move forward if it was never behind? How does anything begin to happen if it was already happening forever? You want to say the universe changes moment by moment, but the boundless has no moments, no ticks of a clock, no first step, no last breath, only the eternal stretch, always there, never arriving. So where does change fit in? Change needs contrast, from one thing to another, from less to more, from empty to full. But if the universe is already everything, already all that can be, what is left to become? What is there to grow into? What is new if nothing is outside it? The paradox says, if there is no boundary, then nothing can enter. If nothing enters, where does difference come from? If the eternal has always been what it is, how can it also be something else? If all things are part of the boundless, how can anything stand out long enough to shift? Imagine a river that has no source and no mouth. It does not spring from a mountain. It does not flow into the sea. It just flows. But where did the water come from? What gave it motion? And if it never stops, how do you measure its current? If there is no starting point, how can you tell if it's faster or slower now? Now imagine the whole cosmos is like that. Not just the stars, but the fabric underneath. The logic, the matter, the order, all boundless. Nothing to point to, nothing to name as the first. But still, movement, still, change, still, transformation. You want to say, perhaps it cycles, but a cycle still needs a turning, a return. But return to what? If there is no beginning, then what is the thing being returned to? If the wheel of the universe turns forever, but has no center, no start, then what defines its rotation? Maybe you say it changes within itself, but even that assumes a shape, a structure, a way for one part to differ from another. But the boundless has no parts, no edges. It is one thing, undivided, unbroken. So what is there inside it to become different? What makes one corner shift if no corner exists? And yet, we see change, we see motion, we feel time. Stars explode, seasons pass, minds awaken, so the paradox sharpens. Either the boundless changes, and then it has direction, division, structure, or it does not change, and everything we see is illusion. If change is real, then the boundless must contain difference. But difference means limit. It means this is not that, and that means separation. But the boundless cannot be separated. So how can it contain change without destroying its own nature? But if change is not real, then what are we? Shadows, dreams, echoes within something still? That too is a paradox, for even an illusion must arise, it must begin, and then we are back to the start, a start in something with no start. The paradox turns again. You ask, if the boundless has always existed, how long has it been changing? Forever, you say. But forever is not a number. You cannot count to it. You cannot reach it. So how do you hold it? How do you measure progress in a time that has no origin? You cannot say, the universe is older now than before, if it was never young. You cannot say, it will become, if it always was. Change needs tension, a difference between what is and what will be. But in the boundless, what will be is already part of what is. So what is the future? A place already inside the present? Then it is not the future. What is the past? A memory with no start? Then it is not the past. The paradox asks, where do you place time inside what has no ends? And still, we see things come and go. But if the universe is eternal, then everything that can happen has already happened, not once, but always. So how can anything be new? And if nothing is new, how can change mean anything? The boundless holds all things, but to hold all things is to hold opposites, stillness and movement, beginning and no beginning. The paradox is not in the stars, it is in the logic, it is in the way infinity folds upon itself. You cannot escape by cutting the boundless into parts. Parts need limits, and the boundless has none. You cannot define its edges because it has no shape. You cannot locate its center because it is everywhere. And so, Anaximander leaves you with this. The source of all things is the boundless. The cause of change is the changeless. The engine of time is the timeless. And what is most eternal is what gives rise to the passing world. It is not meant to comfort. It is meant to bend the mind. It is meant to show that reason, when pushed to its edges, must walk without ground. That thinking breaks when it meets what has no border. And yet, the boundless breathes. The stars wheel. We move. We grow. We die. The paradox stands. The universe has no beginning, but it has stories. It has history. It changes, but it cannot point to the first step or the last. So how does it change? By being what it always was, the place where change and no change hold hands. the space where time and timelessness speak. The boundless is not a solution, it is a question that never stops unfolding. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Zeno's infinite halves. If space is infinitely divisible, how can anything occupy a definite space at all? Take any space, any object, a stone, a coin, a hand. It looks solid, it feels full, but look closer. Cut the space in half. You now have two parts. Cut one of them in half again, then cut that half, and again, and again. There is always more to cut. There is no end, no smallest piece, no final slice that cannot be halved. Space goes on dividing. It never stops. Each part becomes two, each two becomes four. You can do this forever. There is no smallest place, no last grain of space. This is the heart of the paradox. If every piece of space contains another piece, and that piece contains another, then what is space really made of? If there is no bottom, how can there be a top? If there is no end to the small, how can anything ever stand tall? We say an object takes up space, but what space is it taking if that space is made of infinite pieces? You might think, it still adds up. All the halves, all the quarters, all the eighths, they make a whole. But what kind of whole is built from parts that never end? If space is composed of an infinite number of parts, and each part has size, then the whole should be infinitely large, but it's not. A stone is not infinite. A coin is not infinite. Yet it is built from endless parts. Or maybe you say the parts get smaller. So small, they don't matter. But if they don't matter, why do they still exist? Why can you still divide them? And if they do matter, how can you fit them all into a space that isn't infinite? This is the puzzle. An object is finite, but the space it occupies is infinite in parts. How can a finite thing hold an infinite number of parts? If you try to count them, you never finish. If you try to stop, you never started. There is no first part, no base unit, just endless middle. Now think of motion. To move from here to there, you must pass through each point in between, but each point lies inside another point, and each one again inside another, so you must pass through an infinite number of places. But how do you do that in finite time? Each point is small, yes, but the count is not small. The number is endless, and yet you move. So where are you really? If your body stands in space, and space is infinite in division, where does your body stop and space begin? You say, my hand is here. But which here? Which part of here? Each part of space splits into another, so your hand is in all of them, but all of them are endless. Then ask, if an object fills space, but space is infinitely deep, how can anything be fully in any space? To fill something, you must touch all of it. But there is no all. There is always more, always another half, another crack, another slice. And so the object never quite arrives. It never quite finishes being somewhere. You might say, perhaps space ends. Perhaps there is a smallest bit, a final atom of space. But then it cannot be divided. And yet, we divide space in thought without limit. The very idea of measurement is division. If you say, this is 1 meter, you mean it is made of smaller lengths, centimeters, millimeters, nanometers, and so on. If you say, this is a point, you must explain how large the point is, and if it has size, it can be divided. If it cannot be divided, it is not space, it is something else. But if space is something else, something indivisible, then how does anything move through it? How do two things share it? How do you go from one point to another without passing through the space between? The paradox strikes again. If space is made of parts, it cannot be completed. If it is not made of parts, it cannot be measured. Either space is broken into endless pieces, and nothing can ever fill it, or space has no parts, and nothing can ever move in it. Either way, the concept cracks. So what is an object, really? You see it, you touch it. But where is it in all those infinite pieces? Is it in the left half or the right? In the top sliver or the lower third? Is it in the first layer of space or the 10th? But there is no first. There is no 10th. There is no count. So there is no final position, no definite place, only a blur of slices without end. Yet the object is still there. You see it. You weigh it. You drop it, and it lands. So something definite exists. But its space is not definite. Its place is not fixed. It stands in something that never stops breaking apart. So maybe you say, the infinity is only an idea. It's not real. But if the idea works, if the math works, then the idea shapes the world. You measure with rulers, which are made of divisions. You draw lines, made of points. You move through steps, made of distances. If infinite division is just a thought, then everything you use to describe space is built on a thought that cannot be finished. Or maybe you say, infinity is not a thing. It's a process. We don't actually divide forever. We just could. But that's the same problem. If you could always divide, then the limit is never reached. So how can you claim to occupy a space that never finishes unfolding? This is what Zeno saw, that the world you live in, touch, walk through, becomes impossible when you press it with reason, that a step becomes infinite, that a point becomes bottomless, that a space becomes a riddle. So here is the paradox. If space is infinitely divisible, no part of it is ever fully grasped. If no part is grasped, no object can ever be said to occupy one. If nothing occupies space completely, then what does it mean to say anything is somewhere? And yet, we are here. We take up room. We move, we stop. We stretch out our arms and say, this is mine. But what is this? A cloud of infinite pieces, a place with no end, a thing that contains everything but is always missing more. The paradox doesn't stop motion. It doesn't deny space. It simply reveals the fracture beneath it, that the smallest is never small enough, that the whole is never whole enough, that to exist in space is to stand on the edge of something that never ends and never truly begins. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is the Ship of Theseus. If every part of a ship is replaced, is it still the same ship? Theseus sails a ship. It is strong and proud, with wooden planks, tall masts, and firm nails. Over time, the ship wears down. One plank rots, so it is replaced. No one questions it. It is still the Ship of Theseus. Then another plank is replaced. Still the same ship. Then a sail, then the rudder, then the deck, then the mast. Piece by piece, part by part, slowly, carefully, over many years, every single part is changed. There is no original plank left, no original rope. Nothing from the beginning remains, but the ship still sails, and people still call it the Ship of Theseus. It looks the same, it acts the same, it has the same name. But is it the same ship? That is the paradox. If all the parts of something are replaced, does its identity remain? What makes something itself? Is it the parts it is made of? Is it the form it takes? Is it the name it carries? Or is it something else entirely? Now imagine this. Every plank removed from the original ship is saved, stored carefully, labeled, preserved. One day someone takes all these original parts and rebuilds them into a ship. Every single piece is from the first Ship of Theseus, assembled exactly as it was. Now there are two ships. One has the original material, but none of the continuity. The other has all the continuity, but none of the original parts. Which one is the real Ship of Theseus? Can there be two true ships? Can identity split? Or must one be real and the other a copy? But which is the copy? The one with the original matter but a broken history? Or the one with a full history but none of the original matter? Both have a claim. Both feel right. but both cannot be the same single ship. The paradox deepens. If identity comes from physical material, then the rebuilt ship made from the original parts is Theseus's ship. But if identity comes from continuity over time, from the ship being repaired, used, renamed, and maintained, then the ship that never stopped sailing is the real one. But if both views are true in some way, then identity is not fixed. It is not a simple thing. It is stretched between memory and matter, between story and structure. And if identity can be stretched, can it also be broken? Can it be divided? What if the parts are replaced not slowly, but all at once? Take the original ship, remove every plank in a single day, and replace it with new parts in the same form. Is that still the ship of Theseus? Or does speed of change alter identity? If slow change preserves identity, but sudden change destroys it, then what does that say about the nature of the ship? Is identity measured by time? Maybe identity is in function. A ship that sails, carries cargo, bears the name. That's the ship of Theseus. But what if the function changes? What if the ship becomes a museum? Is it still the ship? What if it sinks and is pulled from the sea? What if it is hung in the air, its hull never touching water again? Is a ship still a ship if it never sails? Or perhaps identity is a matter of recognition. If people believe it is the ship of Theseus, then it is. But belief is fragile. Belief can change. If no one remembers the ship, is it still the same? If all the people who knew it die, does its name still hold weight? Can something be itself without anyone to say so? You may say, it's just a question of language. But language carries the world. We name things to keep them in place. Without names, things blur. The paradox is not just about a ship. It is about all things that change and still claim to be the same. It is about people. Your body changes. Your cells die and are replaced. Your thoughts evolve. Your habits shift. The you from 10 years ago is not the you now, but you still say, me. So what is the core? Where is the thread that holds you together? Is it memory? But memory fades. Is it personality? But personality bends. Is it your body? But your body is always becoming something new. So what stays? What gives you the right to keep your name? Are you not, like the ship, a form that floats through time, changing all the while? The paradox will not leave you alone. It follows into law. If you change every part of a machine, is it still the same for a warranty? If you replace every piece of a house, is it still covered by its insurance? In law, in logic, in life, the paradox waits. You want a rule, a clean answer. You want to say, this is the point where something stops being itself, but there is no such point. There is no sharp line, only a slow fading, only the quiet shift. The paradox lives in the in-between. The ship of Theseus is not just a ship. It is a mirror. It reflects every object, every person, every system that changes. It asks, how do you stay yourself when everything inside you is replaced? How do you hold your name when nothing in you is the same? And if identity is only a story, a pattern we agree on, then how fragile is it? How easy to lose? How easy to fake? Can someone steal identity just by copying form? Can a perfect copy become the original if everyone believes it is? Or is identity not in the parts, not in the memory, not in the form, but in the act of continuing? Is it the movement from past to present that makes a thing itself? If so, then stopping is death, then interruption is erasure, then to break the flow is to break the name. And so the paradox circles. The ship sails on, plank by plank replaced. Another ship waits, built from what was lost. Each claims the same name, but the name is stretched too thin. The truth will not fit inside it. And maybe that is the point. The ship of Theseus shows you that identity is not one thing. It is many. It is layered. It is conditional. It is made of time, matter, function, memory, belief, and none of these alone is enough. It is a question dressed as a ship, and it never truly docks. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is River of Heraclitus. You cannot step into the same river twice, so how can anything retain identity if everything is in flux? There is a river. It flows. You step into it. Water touches your skin, swirls around your legs, then passes on. You step out. You step in again. But the water is not the same. The molecules that touched you are gone. New ones take their place. The river has moved, changed, shifted. It is not the same river, and yet you still call it the river, still give it the same name, still treat it as the same thing. But how can it be the same if every part of it is different? That is the paradox. If all things are changing, then nothing stays the same. If nothing stays the same, then how can anything have identity? If you cannot step into the same river twice, then what does it mean to call it a river at all? Heraclitus said, "Everything flows, nothing stays, all is movement. The world is like fire, always burning, always becoming. You are not the same from moment to moment. The river is not the same. The world is not the same. Change is not what happens to things. Change is what things are. So where, in all this flowing, is there anything fixed? You want to say the river is still a river, but what are you pointing to? Not the water. It has passed. Not the shape. The banks erode, shift, collapse. Not the name. Names are just words. So what is the thing that stays the same while everything inside it changes? Maybe the river is a process, not a thing, but an activity, like a dance. But then the dance is not the dancer, the river is not the water. So what is it? A pattern? A rhythm? A direction? But patterns are made of things, and if the things are always new, then how is the pattern the same? You want to believe in identity, that a thing can be itself across time, that change happens to something. But the river says, no, there is no something beneath the change. The change is the thing. The river is not the water. The river is the flowing. But if that is true, then everything becomes like the river. You too. Your body replaces cells, your mind grows, your memories shift. You say, I am me. But which you? The one from this morning? The one from a year ago? If all is flux, then you are a river. So who steps into you? And if no thing stays the same, then what does it mean to know anything? To trust anything? To remember? To promise? You say, this is my friend. But your friend has changed. You say, this is my home. But your home is changing. So is the ground. So is the air. So is the thought that just passed through your mind. You cling to identity like a rock. But the rock is changing too. Slowly, silently, it wears away. It gathers moss. It becomes something else. The paradox will not stop. It asks, how do you hold on to something that will not stay still? Maybe identity is not about staying the same, but changing in a certain way. Maybe the river is the same because it keeps flowing, but then sameness becomes motion, and motion is difference. So now identity depends on being different, always different, but in a familiar shape. But even that fails, because the shape can shift. The path of the river bends, the water floods or dries. At what point do you say, this is no longer the same river? 1 change, 10, 1,000, and how do you decide? If every change is small, but endless, then identity becomes a long goodbye. The paradox deepens. You realize identity is not found in parts, not in names, not in shapes. It is something you declare, something you choose to believe. You say, this is the same river, even though it is not. You say, this is still me, even though you are not. So, maybe identity is not in the thing. It is in the mind. A fiction you agree to. A useful lie. The river is not the same, but you pretend it is. Because if you did not, the world would be too unstable. If everything changes and nothing remains, then meaning dissolves. So you build meaning from continuity you cannot prove. You declare it and hope it holds. But the paradox won't stop. It asks, if the only thing that stays the same is change, then what is real? What can you point to and say, this stays? If even your beliefs change, if even your memory bends, then is there anything that is truly itself? You might say, the river is the combination of flow and place, but places shift, earthquakes, erosion, time. You might say, it is the idea of the river, but ideas shift. Even the word river once meant something different. Meanings drift like currents. So where is the true river? Is it behind the change? Is it beneath the motion? Or is it the motion itself? And if identity is motion, then all things are their own becoming. Never fixed, never finished, always passing into something else. You think you can step into the same river again. But the moment your foot touches the water, the river has moved. And so have you. You are not the same person who stepped in the first time. The water has changed. The moment has changed. The universe has changed. So even repetition is an illusion. There is no again, only this, and then another this, and then another. And so the paradox remains. If everything is in flux, then nothing remains to be named. If nothing remains, then what is identity but a pause in the stream, a breath in the wind, a whisper between waves? You want to hold something steady, but the river says no, the world says no, time says no, and so you float, naming things as they pass, knowing they are not what they were, calling them the same, knowing they are not. The River of Heraclitus flows on. You step in, you step out, and all the while, the paradox steps with you. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Plato's ideal forms. If material objects imitate perfect forms, can they ever truly be themselves? You see a chair, it looks solid, you can sit on it, it holds your weight, it exists. But Plato says this chair is not truly a chair. It is only a shadow of the real chair, the perfect, unchanging chair that exists somewhere beyond space and time. The chair you see is an imitation, a copy, a reflection. And so, the paradox begins. If this object is only a copy of something else, can it ever truly be itself? Every object you touch is a version of something eternal. A dog is not dogness. A tree is not treeness. A circle is not circularity. The object is changing, imperfect, breaking, bending, fading. The form is perfect, untouched, always what it is. So what are you really looking at? Not the thing itself, but its attempt to be something it can never fully become. The paradox says, everything is itself by not being itself. The object is what it is only because it imitates something higher, but imitation means it is not the thing. If it were the real form, it would not change. It would not break. It would not die. So the object is always becoming, never being. It tries to match the form, but the form is untouchable. So what does it mean to be a tree? Is it to grow, to sway, to drop leaves, or is it to match the form of tree? If it matches the form, it is a tree. But if the form is perfect, and this is not, then this tree is never quite right, never fully true, always lacking. You might say the form is like a blueprint. The object is built from it. But the blueprint is not the building, and the building is never perfect. It cracks, it sags, it ages. If the ideal form is flawless, then the copy is flawed by nature. So everything in the world is flawed. Everything that is not fully what it seems. This means no object is truly itself. It pretends, it aims, it reflects, but it never arrives. The paradox grows. To be a thing is to imitate something you are not. so nothing is ever just what it is. A good action tries to match the form of goodness, but the act itself may be weak or selfish or confused. A beautiful painting tries to show beauty, but beauty fades. The ideal stays. So, what do you have? Not beauty, but the pursuit of beauty. Not goodness, but the echo of goodness. So now you look around and ask, what is real? The form you cannot see, or the object you can touch? The idea that never changes, or the thing that always changes? If the idea is real, the object is a lie. But if the object is real, the idea is only a thought. Plato says the idea is more real than the object. But the object is all you can know with your senses. So you live in a world of copies, dreaming of the original. Now ask, can a copy be itself? Can a thing that always points to something higher ever just be what it is? If a chair is only a chair because it points to the form of chair, then it is never a chair in its own right. It exists to reflect something else, and reflection is not identity. A shadow of a tree is not a tree. A reflection in a mirror is not a face. The object becomes a shadow of a shadow. Then, what about people? You are a person, but Plato would say you are a copy of the form of person. You are trying to match the idea of a true human, but you are not perfect. You forget, you fail, you fall. So are you truly yourself, or are you only an attempt? And if you are only an attempt, where do you begin and end? If your entire being is modeled after something else, what do you own that is truly yours? The more you resemble the form, the better you are, but also, the less you are yourself. Because what is uniquely yours is what differs from the perfect, and what differs is flawed. So the paradox deepens. You can only be yourself by failing to be the ideal, but if you fail, you are imperfect. If you succeed, you disappear into the form. To be a perfect person is to become something not yourself. To be yourself is to be a broken version of something better. The same goes for all things. A just society is judged against the form of justice, but every law has flaws. Every system has cracks. The best city is still only a shadow of the ideal city. So should we trust the world we see, or reject it for the invisible, perfect world that never decays? But if we can never touch that world, how do we know it's real? Plato says the soul remembers it. The soul has seen the forms before, but remembering is not knowing, and even if the forms are real, they never appear. So everything we see is a mask of a deeper truth, a truth that never shows its face. Then the question returns, if everything imitates something else, how can anything be truly itself? If identity is borrowed, if shape is inherited, if matter is modeled, then nothing is original, nothing is whole. Every object in the world is reaching, stretching, but never arriving. You might say this makes life meaningful. We are always climbing toward perfection, but you might also say it makes life hopeless because perfection never comes. The form is the goal, but the goal is unreachable. The world is the stage, but the actors are all imitating ghosts. And if all things are copies, is there any truth in the world of matter? Or is truth only in the invisible, in the eternal, in the unchanging? But if truth cannot be seen, how can it be known? If beauty cannot be touched, how can it be loved? So you are caught. The more you strive to be yourself, the more you must imitate the form. The more you imitate the form, the more you become something else. Identity becomes paradox. The chair is not the chair. The person is not the person. The thing is not the thing. And yet, all things exist. You live in a world of mirrors, but the mirrors are cracked. They point to a source you cannot reach. You name what you see, but what you name is always incomplete, always falling short, always chasing the shape of something perfect that will never stand still. And that is the paradox. To be anything at all is to be less than what it means to be that thing. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Diogenes' bald man. If one hair doesn't make someone not bald, where's the line? You see a man with no hair. You say, he is bald. Everyone agrees. No debate. Now imagine he grows a single hair, just one, on the top of his head. You still say, he is bald. One hair does not change that. One hair does not make a difference. Add a second hair, still bald. A third, a fourth, still bald. You keep adding, one hair at a time. Each time you say, still bald. Because what is one more hair? One more hair never seems enough to change the label. Baldness, like fullness, seems to need a clear change. But that change never shows up. And yet, at some point, the man is clearly no longer bald. Now you are in the paradox. At what point does the man stop being bald? Which hair is the one that breaks the rule? Is it the 100th, the 200th, the 1000th? Wherever you draw the line, it feels arbitrary. You cannot point to a single hair and say, that one changed everything. Each individual step looks harmless, but the total journey takes you from one end of meaning to the other. So now you are caught. Every step seems safe. Every hair seems too small to matter, but taken together, they completely reverse the meaning. You begin with clearly bald and end with clearly not bald, but you never see the moment of the change. The change happens without a clear cause. It just slides quietly past you, and still you want to know, where is the line? This is the paradox of vague boundaries, a problem of soft categories. You want words like bald to mean something sharp and clear. You want the world to divide neatly, but it doesn't. The word bald floats over a range of situations. It stretches and bends. It lets too much in and leaves too much out. It works most of the time, but not always. And when you press it with logic, it breaks. You try to fix it, you try to make rules. You say, if someone has fewer than 100 hairs, they are bald. But why 100? Why not 101 or 99? No number feels like the true answer. Every number you choose is just a guess. But if the label depends on a guess, then the label is not solid. And if the label is not solid, how can we use it at all? Still, we use it. We say, that man is bald, and people understand. But do they understand the same thing? Or are we all pointing to slightly different ideas? You may call someone bald when they have stubble. Another may not. So what are we really doing when we use a word like bald? Are we describing a fact? Or are we agreeing on a feeling? Diogenes throws this in your face. If one hair doesn't matter, then two hairs don't matter. If two don't, then three don't. This builds until the word bald becomes meaningless. Either it applies to everyone or to no one. Either it stretches too far or it shrinks to nothing. The same paradox lives in other places. When does a pile of sand stop being a pile? Take away one grain, still a pile. Take away another, still a pile. Keep going, still a pile. Until at last, there's one grain left. Is one grain a pile? Number. But you never saw the pile stop being a pile. You never saw the heap vanish. So when did it happen? Words like bald, tall, old, rich, happy, all have this softness, this fog. You can feel what they mean, but you cannot draw a clear line. And if you cannot draw a line, then logic cannot grip them. They slip through your fingers. You say, this is true, but you can't say exactly when it became true, or if it ever really was. You might try to avoid the problem by saying, these are just vague words. Let's make better ones. But vagueness is not just in words, it's in the world. Hair grows one strand at a time. Money increases one coin at a time. Age climbs 1 second at a time. And yet we treat people as crossing lines. From bald to not bald, from young to old, from poor to rich. We act as if there's a sudden shift, a moment when the label fits, but the shift never arrives all at once. It creeps. So the paradox points to something deeper. It shows you how much of your thinking relies on categories that don't quite hold. It shows you that meaning is often made of blurry lines, and that those blurry lines are everywhere. You might try to escape the paradox by saying, "There's no exact line, but there is still a general truth." That might be true, but the paradox doesn't care about general truths. It cares about the steps, about the logic, about the fact that if every small step makes no difference, then no number of small steps should. But they do. So you are left with contradiction. Either you admit that small steps sometimes make big changes, even when you can't say how, or you admit that your labels have no meaning, that bald is just noise, that all words like it are illusions we use to make sense of a world that refuses to divide cleanly. And still, we live by those words. We vote, we judge, we argue, we label. We say, this person is fit to lead, or this one is too young, or that is too expensive. But each of those claims hides the same problem. Where is the line? When did enough change happen to flip the meaning? You want answers, but the paradox gives you only questions. You want clarity, but the world gives you blur. And so you walk through it, calling things what they are, while knowing they are also something else. You call the man bald, knowing that no single hair made him bald. You use the word, knowing it is both true and not true. That is the paradox. One hair is not enough to change anything, but many hairs change everything. And yet, you can never say which one did it. So every word like bald becomes a riddle, every change becomes a mystery, and every identity becomes a question you cannot fully answer. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Aristotle's growing man. If a man grows over time, when exactly does he become a different person? A baby is born, small, fragile, unaware. The baby becomes a child. The child becomes a boy. The boy becomes a man. The man becomes old, and then he dies. At every stage you say, that is the same person. You give him one name. You call him by it from the cradle to the grave. But each moment, he changes. His body, his voice, his thoughts. He grows taller. He learns new words. He forgets others. He loves. He loses. He becomes someone else. And yet, you still say it is him. That is the paradox. If a person grows slowly and constantly, when does the change make him a new person? One moment does not seem enough. 1 inch taller, 1 wrinkle more, 1 new memory, none of those seem to erase who he was. But taken together, they make him different. So when does he stop being who he was? If you compare the baby to the old man, they seem like two people. One cannot talk, one cannot walk. The other has lived decades, learned language, suffered loss, known joy. If you placed them side by side, you would not call them the same man. But they are. By name, by law, by memory, you say they are the same. Still, something in you hesitates. Something in you sees the gap. The paradox lies in the question of identity through time. What makes someone the same person over a lifetime? Is it the body? But the body changes. Cells die and are replaced. The face changes shape. The hair changes color. The bones shift. The hands that once held a rattle now hold a pen, a steering wheel, a cane. Is it the mind? But the mind changes too. Ideas are learned and forgotten. Desires come and go. The man who once wanted to be an astronaut now wants peace and quiet. The boy who feared the dark becomes the man who sleeps alone. Thoughts rise and fall like waves, never still, never the same. So what remains? What stays to hold the name in place? If nothing stays the same, how can we speak of sameness at all? You might say it is the soul, But what is that? If it cannot be seen, if it cannot be measured, then how does it answer the paradox? A soul untouched by time cannot explain a self that changes every day, and if the soul changes too, then we are back where we began. Perhaps identity is in memory. The man remembers the boy he was, but memory is flawed. We forget. We reshape the past. Sometimes we even invent it. What if the man remembers falsely? What if the boy remembers nothing? Is he still the same person if he cannot remember who he was? Aristotle saw that growth is not sudden. It is slow, continuous, a process, not a leap. But in that very continuity lies the puzzle. Because if there is no moment when the person becomes new, then there is also no moment when he stays the same. He is always becoming. So, maybe identity is like a flame. The flame of a candle burns, but the fire is never the same from one moment to the next. It flickers. It feeds on new wax, new air, and yet we call it the same flame. But is it? The growing man is like that, never frozen, always in motion. But you want to freeze him, to pin him down, to say, this is who he is. And the paradox says, no, he is always passing from who he was into who he will be. So, is there ever a true self, a solid core? Or is the self a path, not a point? Is identity a journey, not a place? But if it is a journey, then who is walking it? If there is no one fixed, then who grows? Maybe the man is a story, a thread of events, moments, choices, but stories change. They can be edited, rewritten, retold, and some stories end before they are finished. Is an unfinished life a full person? The paradox reaches deeper. Suppose a man wakes with no memory. His thoughts are new. His body is the same, but his mind is different. Is he still the same person? Some say yes, because the body continues. Others say no, because the self is lost. So what matters more, what is outside, or what is inside? Then imagine the reverse. The body changes completely. New hands, new heart, new face. But the mind remains. The memories are intact. The thoughts continue. Is he the same man then, or something new? You want the self to be whole, to last, to stay. But the growing man reminds you that the self is always shifting. The boy becomes the man without noticing. No trumpet, no sign, just a quiet drift. Until one day, he looks in the mirror and sees a stranger with his name. And yet, we treat identity as fixed. We punish, we reward, we remember. We say, you did this, you are responsible. But was it the same person? Is the man who committed the crime still the same as the man we judge, or has he changed enough to be someone else? You cannot escape the paradox. If you change slowly, you never notice the break. But the break still happens, and if there is no exact moment of change, then identity is not a switch. It is a blur, a gradual fading from one self to the next. Still, we hold on to the name. We say, he is growing, not he is becoming someone else. But maybe that's just comfort. Maybe the truth is harder. Maybe the man who grows is always dying into someone new. And the self is a chain of moments held together by memory and hope. Aristotle's growing man is not just a person. He is a question about who we are and how long we can remain ourselves while everything in us changes. He asks, if you become someone new every day, how can you ever say who you are? And that is the paradox. The man grows, the man lives, the man changes, and yet he is always called the same man. But if everything inside him is different, then who is he really? Where does the man end and the new one begin? Or was there never one man at all, just a process pretending to be a person? Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Eubulides' paradox of the unknown. If you don't know a person and they walk in, how do you recognize that you don't know them? A stranger enters the room. You look up. You've never seen them before. You say, I don't know that person. It seems simple, but the paradox asks, how do you know that you don't know them if you don't know who they are? How do you recognize the unknown as unknown? If knowing someone means being able to identify them, and you cannot identify this person, then what lets you decide they are not known to you? You claim to know what you don't know. You say, that face is unfamiliar. But unfamiliar to what? You have no name, no memory, no connection. So how does your mind match them to nothing? If the person is truly unknown, what standard are you using to label them a stranger? You might say, I don't recognize them, but recognition means comparing what you see to what you've stored. But if you have no memory of this person, then there is no match to fail. So how do you recognize the failure? The paradox grows. If someone walks in wearing a mask and you can't see their face, do you know whether you know them? You wait for the mask to come off. Then you say, ah, I know you, or I don't. But until then, you do not decide. So if a face is completely unknown and there is no mask, what makes you sure that you don't know them? Suppose you forgot them. You met them once, years ago. You shook hands, shared words, but time erased the memory. They walk in now and you say, I don't know them. But that isn't true. You did know them. You just forgot. So the unknown may not be truly unknown, just misfiled, but you still treat it as unknown. So what does it mean to not know someone? Is it a lack of memory, a lack of name, a lack of feeling? What if their face looks familiar, but you can't place it? You say, I think I've seen them before. Are they known or unknown? Half known? Almost known? And how do you draw the line? If you know a person's face but not their name, do you know them? If you know their name but not their voice, do you know them? If you've met them once but never spoke, does that count? Is knowledge a full picture or a collection of fragments? The paradox asks, what kind of thing is the unknown? If it's nothing, then how do you point to it? If it's something, then how do you say you don't know it? To say I don't know is to refer to a thing you claim not to recognize. But how can you refer to what is beyond your knowing? You might say, I can tell they aren't familiar. But what does familiarity mean? A feeling, a sense of recognition? But feelings deceive. You might feel someone is unfamiliar when you've met them before, or feel that someone is familiar when you've never met. Your judgment can be wrong, and if you can be wrong, then how can you trust your sense of the unknown? You might say, they're not on my list, but the list is inside you, your memories, your associations, and your list may be incomplete. So when someone appears and you don't find them on your list, you declare them unknown. But the list isn't perfect. The process isn't perfect. So maybe the unknown is just the not yet remembered. Then the paradox becomes sharper. You're not saying, I don't know that person. You're saying, I don't remember whether I know them. But memory is slippery. So the unknown becomes not a fact, but a shadow, a possibility. But even shadows have shapes. You look at someone and feel nothing, no click, no connection. So you say, I don't know them. But how do you measure that feeling? How do you know it means what you think it means? Now, turn it around. Imagine someone says, you know me. You deny it. You say, no, I don't. But they insist. They name the day you met, the place, the conversation. It was short. It was forgettable. But it happened. You didn't know you knew them, but you did. So your sense of the unknown failed. The stranger was never a stranger. You just forgot. So if the unknown can be mistaken for the known, and the known can be mistaken for the unknown, then the category of not known becomes unstable. You think you can label it, but the label slips. What about objects? You see a tool you've never used. You say, I don't know what this is, but you might, somewhere deep in memory, from a photo, a book, a film. Maybe your hands remember even when your mind does not. So even with things, the unknown is not truly unknown, just unreachable. And if that's true, then how can you be sure of not knowing? You can be sure of knowing. You say, I know this person. You describe them, confirm the details, but to say, I don't know them, is to stand on a negative, a hole, a gap. And how do you trust a gap? Eubulides forces you to ask, when you say, I don't know, what are you really doing? Are you declaring a truth, or are you revealing an absence? But an absence cannot be seen, so how do you speak of it? You think the unknown is easy to spot, but spotting it means seeing that something is missing, and seeing what's missing means you already know what it should be. So how can you say a person is unknown if you have no idea who they are? To know what is missing, you must know what it would be like if it were there. But then you know more than nothing. So the unknown is never pure. It is always touched by knowledge, or the expectation of knowledge. You expect to recognize, and when you don't, you call it the unknown. But that means the unknown depends on recognition failing, and failure is not the same as absence. So maybe you don't know that you don't know, you just think you don't know. And maybe that's enough. But if that's enough, then the unknown is just a guess, a feeling dressed as fact. And that is the paradox. You claim not to know, but to do that, you must somehow know what you don't know. You must see what is not in your mind. You must name the absence without having touched the presence. You must identify the stranger without ever having met. You speak of what is beyond you, and in doing so, you act as though it is not. The unknown becomes a mirror. It reflects your limits, but it also reflects your reach. You say, I don't know, but you are already forming a shape in the dark, already guessing, already comparing, already stepping beyond what you think is empty. And so, the unknown is never quite unknown. It is half known, half felt, half imagined. And yet, you speak of it with full confidence. You point to a person and say, I don't know them. But even that is a kind of knowing. And the paradox, once again, is that you don't really know how you know what you don't. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Meno's paradox. How can you search for knowledge of something you don't know? If you knew it, you wouldn't need to search. You begin a search. You want to know something. You ask a question. But the paradox asks, what are you searching for? If you already know it, then there is no need to look. The search is over before it begins. But if you don't know it, then how will you recognize the answer when it comes? If the thing is truly unknown, how can you know you've found it? The paradox begins with a question and ends with no path forward. You are trapped. You cannot search for what you know. You already have it. And you cannot search for what you don't know. You have no way to find it. No direction, no shape, no sign to follow. It is like looking for a face you have never seen and expecting to recognize it the moment it appears. So why search at all? Why ask questions? Why explore the unknown if the unknown cannot even be named? Meno's paradox says that all learning is either pointless or impossible. If you know, no need. If you don't know, no way. And yet you go on learning, asking, reading, discovering. So something doesn't fit. The logic says you can't do it, but you do it every day. Still, the paradox waits. Imagine someone asks you to define virtue. You begin to think. But then the question strikes. Do you already know what virtue is? If yes, you should be able to say it clearly. If not, how do you even know what to look for? You are either chasing what you already hold or grasping at shadows. Even trial and error fails here. To try something and see if it's right, You must have some idea of what right looks like, but if the idea is already in you, then you're not truly learning. You're just matching what you already knew. But if the idea is not in you, then how do you judge the result? So the paradox pulls your mind into a loop. To know is to recognize. To recognize is to compare. To compare is to remember. But if you have no memory, no image, no spark, then you are blind. How do you start when you do not even know where to begin? It is a problem of beginnings, of how learning starts at all. If the door to knowledge only opens with knowledge, how does anyone ever open it? The key must already be in your hand. But if it is, why are you standing outside? Some say learning is like recollection. You don't discover new truth, you uncover forgotten truth. The soul has seen everything before. The search is not for newness, but for memory. That answers the paradox with a story. You are not seeking what you've never known, but what you once knew and lost. But what if you never knew it? What if you truly are ignorant? Not forgetful, but empty. Then the paradox comes back. How can emptiness know it is empty? How can it search for something it has never held? You might say curiosity drives you, but curiosity needs an itch, a spark, a feeling that there is something to be found. But even that feeling needs shape, and shape is knowledge. So again, the paradox asks, if you know enough to be curious, don't you already know too much to be truly ignorant? And if you are truly ignorant, what drives you to search at all? The paradox paints ignorance not as a lack, but as a wall that blocks even the desire to climb it. If you don't know what you don't know, you do not know that there is anything to know. So why search? This turns learning into a miracle. It should not be possible, and yet it happens. It breaks the logic. Somehow the mind reaches beyond itself. It calls to something it cannot name. It reaches into darkness and returns with fire. But how? Maybe the paradox exposes the limits of strict logic. Logic wants clean categories. Known or unknown, yes or no. But maybe learning lives in the gray space between. Maybe we are never fully ignorant. Maybe we always have fragments, half-shapes, glimpses. Maybe knowledge is not a switch, but a gradient, a dim light that grows brighter as we move toward it. So perhaps the paradox does not stop learning. It just humbles it. It shows that every question is built on a little bit of knowing, that every search begins not from zero, but from a guess, a hunch, a whisper. Still, the paradox speaks. It says, if you begin a search, admit that you already hold part of the answer. Otherwise, you would not know to search. And if you hold nothing, then stay silent, for you will not even know what it is you are missing. But we do not stay silent. We ask, we reach, we fail, and ask again. So maybe the paradox isn't a wall, maybe it's a mirror. It shows us that what we call ignorance is never pure, that within every question is a seed of knowing. Meno's paradox is not an argument against learning. It is an argument against certainty, against the illusion that knowledge can be built from nothing. It reminds us that all discovery is shaped by what we already bring to the search, and that the unknown is never fully unknown. It is a shadow cast by something partly seen. So when you ask, what is this? You are not stepping into darkness. You are stepping into fog. And each step forward clears a little more. You do not know the full picture, but you know enough to walk. That is how learning moves. Not from nothing to something, but from almost to more, from question to clearer question, from vague image to sharper form. And the paradox stands at the beginning, reminding you that no beginning is truly empty, and no search starts without a spark. And that is the paradox. You cannot search for what you do not know, unless you already know just enough to know that you do not. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is the Euthyphro Dilemma. Is something good because the gods love it, or do the gods love it because it's good? Imagine something called good. Kindness, justice, courage, whatever you believe is good. Now ask, why is it good? Is it good because the gods say it is? Or do the gods say it is good because it already is? If it is good because the gods love it, then goodness depends on their choice. They could say cruelty is good, and then cruelty would be good. They could love war, and war would become holy. In that case, good becomes whatever the gods decide, no matter what it looks like. That makes goodness unstable, arbitrary, a product of power, not of truth. But if good is just what the gods command, then the word good loses meaning. It becomes a mirror of divine will, not a thing with its own shape. Right and wrong are just the moods of heaven. But if the gods love something because it is good, then goodness stands apart from them. It is higher than them. It is a standard they follow. In that case, the gods are not the source of goodness. They are its admirers. They obey it. They recognize it, but they do not create it. That makes goodness independent, unshaken, but it also makes the gods less powerful. They do not decide what is right. They only see it and respond. So the paradox opens wide. You must choose. Either goodness is based on divine choice and therefore can be anything, or it is separate from the divine and therefore makes the divine unnecessary. If the gods make things good, then morality is just obedience. But if morality exists without them, then why do we need them to define it? This shakes the ground of faith. Many believe the divine is the root of all goodness, that to do what is right is to follow the will of the gods. But if their will can declare anything to be right, even what seems cruel or strange, then what are we really trusting? Not goodness, but authority, not justice, but command. And if we say no, the gods only command what is already good, then where does that goodness come from? What is it made of? Who decides it? If not the gods, then what? Is goodness just logic? Is it reason? Is it a kind of law that even gods cannot break? But laws need lawmakers. So who made this law of goodness that even the gods must respect? Is there a form of good that exists beyond all beings? Something eternal, unchanging, untouchable? But if that's true, then gods are not supreme. They serve something higher. And if there is something higher, is that the true God? Or is goodness just an idea, a pattern, like mathematics, discovered, not created? If good is like 2 + 2 = 4, then the gods can't change it, only recognize it. But if good is like art or music, created and chosen, then the gods are the artists, and the rules are theirs. So what kind of thing is good? A fact or a command? A truth or a choice? The paradox refuses to answer. It shows you 2 doors, and both lead to trouble. Choose the first. Good is whatever the gods say. Then ask, what if they say something terrible? What if they love something cruel? What if they change their mind? If their will defines right and wrong, then there is no fixed morality, only shifting favor. You must obey, not because something makes sense, but because power demands it. Morality becomes hollow, a puppet of divine moods. Choose the second. The gods love the good because it is good. Then you have to explain what good is without them. You have to find a source of right and wrong that stands on its own. But if you can do that, then the gods become unnecessary. You can know the good without prayer, without faith, without revelation. You can use reason, reflection, empathy. That lifts the burden off the gods, but it also removes them from the center of moral life. So you are left with the question, is morality grounded in power or in principle? And if it's principle, what gives the principle its force? Why should we follow it? Why should the gods follow it? if it is simply right? What makes it right? You might say, we do not need to know why it is good. We only need to know that it is. But that is not an answer. That is a pause. The paradox still waits behind it. You might try to escape by saying, the gods are perfectly good by nature. They only command what is already right. But that still leaves the same problem. If their goodness is part of who they are, not a matter of choice, then they are still following a rule, not making one. If they could not choose to command evil, then they are not sovereign over goodness. If they could choose to command evil, then goodness depends on their whim. Either way, something breaks. So what do we say about goodness? If it needs a source, and that source is the gods, we face one problem. If it does not need a source and stands alone, we face another. The paradox traps you in the middle. You want goodness to be firm, clear, trustworthy, but the more you question it, the more it shakes. Is it real, or is it a name we give to what we admire? Is it objective, or is it a mirror of divine preference? The Euthyphro Dilemma doesn't just apply to ancient gods. It applies to all authority. If a leader says something is good, is it good because they say so, or do we judge them by a higher standard? And if there is a higher standard, who built it? Who keeps it standing? Even in your own life, the paradox lives. When you say something is right, are you expressing a belief, following a rule, obeying a feeling? You want to say, this is good, but the paradox whispers, why? And that is the paradox. If good is chosen, it can be anything. If it is not chosen, it must come from something else. Either way, goodness slips from your grasp, and still you speak of it, still you follow it, still you believe in it, without knowing whether you're walking behind the gods or ahead of them. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is the Ring of Gyges. If one could act unjustly without consequences, would justice still have value? Imagine a ring. It is ordinary in shape, but extraordinary in power. When worn, it makes the person invisible, completely unseen, hidden from every eye, beyond every law, safe from all punishment. No one can catch you. No one can judge you. With the ring, you can steal, lie, kill, cheat, and no one will ever know. Now the question comes, would you still be just? If no one sees your actions and no one can stop you, what keeps you from doing wrong? Is justice something you do only because others are watching? Or is it something deeper, something you would choose even when there is no reward and no risk? The paradox begins here. Justice is usually praised. People admire it. Societies build laws around it. But Gyges' ring asks, what if justice has no reward? What if you could gain everything by being unjust? Wealth, power, pleasure, and lose nothing? Would you still call justice good? Suppose a man puts on the ring. At first, he is cautious, but slowly he starts to test the limits. He takes what he wants. He harms who he wants. He lies, and it works. He cheats, and he wins. And no punishment follows. The ring protects him. Over time, the man becomes rich, respected, untouched. The world calls him successful, but he is unjust, and no one knows. Now ask, is he worse off than the just man who suffers, who follows the rules, who is poor, ignored, or even punished for doing right? Which life is better? Which is more desirable? If justice brings pain and injustice brings pleasure, then what is justice worth? If being good means losing everything, and being bad means gaining everything, then why would anyone choose good? Maybe you say justice is valuable for its own sake, but is that true, or just something people say to keep order? Maybe justice is only a tool, something we use to avoid harm, to win trust, to protect ourselves. Maybe it only has value because of its consequences. But the ring removes all consequences. With the ring, there is no risk in doing wrong. So what remains? If you take away fear and shame and law, Does anything stop you? Does justice survive when the lights are off and no one is looking? You might say a good person would not act unjustly, even with the ring. But what does that mean? Is goodness a habit, a belief, a fear that never fades, or is it just a mask people wear until they have power? The paradox presses further. If no one is harmed by your invisible crimes, is it even wrong? If you steal without being caught, lie without being believed, kill without leaving a trace, what harm is done? What justice is broken, if justice means balance? But then again, what if everyone had the ring? If everyone acted without fear of consequence? What kind of world would that be? A world where promises mean nothing, where trust is a joke, where power hides behind invisibility. Would you want to live in that world? So perhaps justice only matters because it protects the world we want to live in, not because it is good by itself, but because it makes life possible. If that's true, then justice is not about what we believe, it's about what we need. It is a structure, not a virtue. But if justice is only useful, not meaningful, then the man with the ring is not wrong. He is only free. And that idea shakes the ground of every moral system. If justice cannot survive freedom, is it justice at all? You might say, yes, justice has value because it shapes the soul, that even unseen actions affect who we are inside, that the man who acts unjustly becomes unjust, cold, cruel, small. But what if he feels fine? What if his conscience never stirs? What if he sleeps well, eats well, laughs well? Can you still say he is worse off? Does an invisible crime leave a mark the criminal cannot see? Or is guilt just a shadow cast by fear? If no fear, no shadow. Then what? The paradox grows heavier. It asks if we love justice, or only the rewards that come from being seen as just. It asks if goodness is real, or only performance, if people are moral, or just afraid. It also asks about identity. If you do wrong in secret and no one ever knows, who are you? Are you your true self when alone, or only when judged? If your image is clean but your soul is dirty, does the lie matter? But maybe that is the trap. Maybe the ring is not about invisibility. Maybe it is about exposure. It shows you to yourself. With the ring, you learn what you truly are, when nothing stops you, when no one can catch you, when the choice is yours alone. If you choose injustice, what does that reveal? If you choose justice, what does that protect? So perhaps the ring does not destroy morality. Perhaps it reveals it. It strips away the masks, the laws, the watchers, and leaves only the chooser. And in that moment, the paradox stares back. Would you be just with the ring? Would you act well when no one will ever praise you? Would you resist the temptation to take, to lie, to win? If yes, then justice may be real. It may live deep inside, beneath rules, beneath fear, as a choice you make for its own sake. But if not, then maybe justice is not what you thought. Maybe it is not virtue. Maybe it is just a game we play when the lights are on. And that is the paradox. The ring gives you perfect freedom and then asks what you will do with it. And whatever you choose, it does not punish you. It simply asks why. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Socrates' wisdom. Socrates claims to be wise because he knows nothing. But isn't that a kind of knowledge? Socrates walks through Athens. He speaks to poets, craftsmen, generals, and lawmakers. They all believe they are wise. They believe they know truth, justice, beauty, courage. But when Socrates questions them, their answers fall apart. They contradict themselves. They cannot explain what they claim to know. Socrates says, they think they know, but they do not. I, however, do not think I know. That makes me wiser than them. He says, I know that I know nothing. And here the paradox begins. If he truly knows nothing, then he cannot even know that he knows nothing, because knowing that you do not know is already a kind of knowledge. It is an understanding. It is an insight. So does he know something or not? If he knows nothing, then he knows at least one thing. And if he knows one thing, then he cannot claim to know nothing. But if he does not know that he knows nothing, then maybe he is just as lost as everyone else. So either he knows something and his statement is false, or he knows nothing and his statement is meaningless. The paradox tightens. If claiming ignorance is wisdom, then every fool is wise. If all it takes to be wise is to admit that you are ignorant, then ignorance becomes virtue. But clearly, not all ignorance is wise. A man who knows nothing and doesn't care to learn is not called wise. So there must be more to it. Socrates seems to know that the people around him are confused. He knows how to spot weak arguments. He knows how to ask the right questions. He knows how to make others see their contradictions. This requires skill, insight, judgment. So again, we ask, how can someone who knows how to uncover ignorance be truly ignorant? Maybe Socrates is playing a trick. Maybe when he says, "I know nothing," he means, "I know nothing for certain." Maybe he means, "I do not pretend to know more than I do." If that's true, then his wisdom is not in what he knows, but in what he refuses to claim. But even that is a form of knowing. He knows the limits. He knows the danger of false certainty. He knows how not to know. So the paradox becomes deeper. If knowing your limits is wisdom, then knowledge includes awareness of ignorance. But if awareness of ignorance is knowledge, then ignorance cannot be total. You cannot be truly ignorant and also know that you are. Total ignorance is blind. It believes in itself. It never questions. So Socratic ignorance is not total. It is conscious. It is sharp. It reflects. So the question is, can self-awareness of not knowing count as knowing? Can knowledge about the absence of knowledge still be called knowledge? The paradox whispers, yes and no. Yes, because it is a clear insight into the human condition. Knowing that you do not know creates space for learning. It humbles the ego. It sharpens the mind. It invites questions. No, because it offers no answers. It does not build. It does not solve. It only clears the ground. Socrates doesn't replace false ideas with better ones. He leaves gaps. He tears down what people think they know and walks away. So is this wisdom, or is it just a more elegant form of confusion? Socrates says he is wiser than those who think they know. But what about someone who knows a little and admits it? Is that person wiser than Socrates? Is it better to know a few true things than to know nothing at all? But who decides what is true? Who decides when knowledge is real? The paradox keeps pushing. If Socrates is wise because he knows his ignorance, then what happens when he begins to learn something? When he gains a little truth, does he become less wise? Does gaining knowledge reduce his wisdom? That would be strange. Wisdom should grow with knowledge. But Socrates' version flips that. Wisdom is the absence of false confidence. So as soon as he claims certainty, maybe he loses the very thing that made him wise. So now the paradox shifts shape. It becomes a riddle of humility. To be wise, you must doubt your wisdom. But if you doubt it too much, maybe you never act. Maybe you never teach. Maybe you never lead. So where is the line? How much knowledge can you have before wisdom turns into arrogance? How much ignorance can you admit before wisdom turns into emptiness? Socrates lives in the middle space. He questions everything but never answers. He exposes error but avoids certainty. He leaves others unsettled and calls it clarity. He does not build, he unbuilds. But unbuilding is not easy. It takes care, awareness, honesty. So again, it is not nothing. It is not ignorance. It is a craft. So maybe Socratic wisdom is not knowledge of something, but knowledge about knowing itself. a second-level knowledge, a meta-knowledge. He doesn't know what justice is, but he knows that fake answers about justice fall apart. He doesn't know what virtue is, but he knows that people pretending to know are dangerous. So then, the paradox becomes this. True wisdom is knowing that most people are wrong, including yourself. But if everyone is wrong, and you know it, how do you live? How do you choose? If you doubt all knowledge, how do you decide anything? How do you raise children, write laws, or act in the world? Socrates says, the unexamined life is not worth living, but an endlessly examined life may not be worth living either. If every belief is questioned forever, maybe nothing ever gets done. So is the goal just to doubt or to find? And if you never find, can you still be called wise? The paradox is not just in what Socrates says, it is in what he does. He makes you doubt the ground beneath your feet, but offers no new place to stand. He tears open your ideas, but gives you no map. And yet, you feel clearer. Not because you know more, but because you know what to let go of. So in the end, maybe wisdom is not what you carry, but what you drop. Not what you know, but what you stop pretending to know. Maybe wisdom is the silence that follows the collapse of false certainty. And that is the paradox. Socrates knows nothing, and in that, he knows something profound. He is ignorant, and yet wiser than those who claim to know. He does not teach answers, but teaches people how to question. He is empty, but full of insight. He knows nothing, and maybe, just maybe, that is the beginning of knowing everything. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Plato's noble lie. Can a falsehood serve justice if it unites and stabilizes society? Plato imagines a city, perfectly ordered, ruled by reason. In this city, people are divided by nature into three groups: rulers, guardians, and workers. To keep peace and harmony, everyone must stay in their place. But people do not always accept their role. They doubt, they question, they compare. So Plato offers a lie, not to deceive in malice, but to guide with purpose. The lie says, all citizens were born from the earth, the city is their mother, and inside each person is a different kind of metal, gold in the rulers, silver in the guardians, bronze or iron in the workers. The metal decides your soul, your role, your destiny. If you are gold, you must lead. If you are iron, you must serve, not because of wealth or birth, but because of nature. This lie is told from childhood. It is repeated by teachers, by leaders, by poets. It is believed not as a fact, but as a foundation. It holds the city together. It creates order. It gives meaning. And here the paradox begins. If the lie creates justice, is it still a lie? If the falsehood leads to unity, harmony, and stability, can it be called unjust? If truth causes chaos, but lies create peace, which should we choose? We say justice is based on truth. That honesty is the root of morality. But the noble lie challenges this. It says some lies are useful, some lies are good, not because they are true, but because they work. They guide, they calm, they bind. But what happens when the people learn the lie? What happens when someone says, there is no metal in our souls, there is only choice, chance, training? Does the city crumble? Does justice collapse? The noble lie lives in tension between what is real and what is right, between what people want and what they need, between individual truth and collective belief. It is a lie told for the sake of order. But is order more important than truth? Suppose a man believes the lie. He works as a farmer, thinking his bronze soul is natural. He is content. He feels he belongs. His life is hard, but meaningful. Then one day, he learns the truth, that the story was made up, that the metal is not real. Now he feels betrayed, angry, lost. Was he more free before or after? Now imagine a ruler who knows the lie. She tells it with care, not for power, but for peace. She believes people need the story, that without it, envy will grow, war will rise. If she tells the truth, everything may fall apart. So she stays silent. Or worse, she repeats the lie, calmly, clearly, with a steady voice. Is she just or unjust? Is lying for the greater good still a lie, or does the good erase the lie? If the result is harmony, does the means matter? Plato says the noble lie is necessary, that society is too fragile to survive pure truth, that people must believe in something bigger than themselves. But does this make justice a performance, a shared illusion, a dream we agree not to wake from? If justice depends on fiction, is it real or just convenient? The paradox is sharp. If we tell the truth and the city falls into conflict, was that a good act? If we lie and keep the peace, was that evil? We want both truth and harmony. But the noble lie says we cannot always have both. Maybe we live by noble lies already, stories we call history, identities we call nations, beliefs we call traditions. Maybe we all agree on fictions, because they keep the chaos away. But if so, who gets to decide which lies are noble and which are not? One man's noble lie may be another's manipulation. One leader's myth may be another's control. So the paradox asks, who gets to decide which lie is worth telling? If the rulers lie for peace, can the people trust them? If the people obey for peace, can they call themselves free? If everyone knows the truth but agrees to act as if the lie is real, is that still a lie or a ritual? The paradox doesn't go away, it only spreads into education, into law, into love. Parents lie to children for their safety. Teachers simplify truths to help learning. Leaders hide secrets for national security. Lovers soften words to avoid pain. Are these noble lies too? And if so, is all of life built on them? Maybe the noble lie is not a single story, but a way of living, a way of choosing peace over purity, order over openness. But if too many lies grow, the foundation cracks, and then trust is lost. Then the people ask, what else is false? So the lie that brings peace may one day bring its own destruction. It is noble only while it works, but once seen, it turns to poison. The lie is noble only if it remains invisible. That is the paradox. Justice based on truth demands openness. Justice based on unity demands belief. When those demands clash, which one do we serve? The noble lie promises a just city, but it does so by denying some truths. So Plato's question becomes ours. Is justice a truth or a function? Is it what is real or what holds us together? If the only way to live well together is to believe something false, then maybe the problem is not the lie. Maybe the problem is us. Maybe we cannot handle a world built entirely on truth. Maybe we need fiction not to escape reality, but to survive it. But once you see the lie, you cannot unsee it. Once you know it is not true, you must choose. Live by truth and risk the collapse, or live by the lie and keep the peace. And that is the paradox. The noble lie may protect justice, or it may destroy it. It may save the city, or it may betray it. It may unite people, or it may fool them. It is noble, and it is a lie, and it leaves you with a question that has no clean answer. Only consequences. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Epicurus's problem of evil. If the gods are good and powerful, why does evil exist? You look around and you see suffering. Children cry in hunger. Storms destroy homes. Disease strikes without warning. People hurt one another. The innocent suffer. The guilty escape. The world is full of pain. And then someone tells you that the gods are good. The gods are kind. The gods are powerful. They can do anything. They love justice. They protect the good. But the question rises, If they can stop evil and they want to stop evil, then why does evil remain? That is the paradox. It stands with sharp edges. If the gods are willing to stop evil but cannot, then they are not powerful. If they are able but not willing, then they are not good. If they are both willing and able, then why is there evil? And if they are neither willing nor able, then why call them gods? You want to believe the world is watched over, that there is order, that pain has purpose. But the paradox asks, if the gods exist and they care, why do they allow so much pain? Why do they allow it at all? Some say evil is a test, a way to shape character, to make us stronger. But what is tested in the death of a child? What lesson is learned in senseless pain? Why must growth come through cruelty? Others say evil is a mystery, beyond human understanding, that the gods work in ways we cannot grasp. But this hides the problem. If we cannot know their ways, how can we call them good? If their goodness is unknowable, how do we know it exists at all? Some say evil is the price of free will, that we suffer because people choose to harm each other, that freedom means the possibility of wrong. But what of natural disasters? What of diseases? What of death that comes from no human choice? And even if freedom allows evil, why not limit the worst of it? Why allow so much? Why allow it to fall so randomly? The paradox does not accuse. It only asks. If there is power and if there is love, then why is there no rescue? Maybe the gods are real, but do not care. Maybe they watch, but do not act. Maybe they created the world and walked away. Then they are not good. They are indifferent. And if they are indifferent, how do we worship them? Or maybe the gods are trying, but not strong enough. Maybe evil fights back. Maybe the world is a battleground. Then they are not all-powerful. And if they are not all-powerful, why do we place our trust in them? Or maybe evil does not exist. Maybe what we call evil is only misunderstood, a necessary part of a greater plan. But tell that to the one in pain. Tell that to the victim. If evil is an illusion, then suffering is a lie. But suffering feels real. It bleeds. It screams. It breaks hearts. And no philosophy can soften its edge. The paradox stands in the middle of belief. It cuts through comfort. It demands an answer that fits, but no answer fits easily. You want to say the gods are good because you want to believe goodness rules the world. You want to say they are powerful because you want to believe someone can fix what is broken. But if both are true, then the presence of evil makes no sense. So you bend the shape of the gods, or you bend the shape of evil, or you say nothing at all. Some say evil exists to make good possible. Without darkness, light cannot shine. But then goodness is only good by contrast. It needs evil to exist. So goodness is not perfect. It is dependent. And if the gods need evil to show their goodness, then they are not above evil. They are partners with it. Others say we suffer now for joy later, that in the afterlife all pain will be healed, that justice will come. But why wait? Why delay justice? Why make people suffer first? What kind of goodness waits for death before it acts? The paradox echoes in silence. Every time someone cries out in grief and hears no answer, every time a prayer goes unanswered, every time the wicked prosper and the righteous fall, it waits in those moments, asking the same question. You might say that the gods suffer with us, that they feel our pain. But if they feel it and can end it, why don't they? If they cannot end it, then their tears are not enough. So maybe there are no gods. Maybe the world is what it is, raw, chaotic, without a guiding hand. Then the paradox disappears, but so does comfort, so does hope, so does meaning beyond what we make ourselves. Or maybe the gods are not as we imagined. Maybe they are not here to protect, but to witness, not to stop evil, but to endure it with us. But if they do not stop it, are they still good? Are they still gods? The paradox forces a choice. Believe in power without love, or love without power, or both, and live with the contradiction, or neither, and walk alone. It is not just a puzzle. It is a question about the heart of faith, about the nature of goodness, about the shape of the world. If evil exists and the gods exist, then the two must be explained together. If they cannot be explained together, then one must fall. And that is the paradox. A good and powerful God should not allow evil. Evil exists. So what do we believe? What do we change? Do we redefine the gods, or do we redefine evil? Or do we close our eyes and say both, while understanding neither? The problem of evil is not just a question. It is a mirror. It shows what we want to believe. It shows what we fear. It asks if justice is real, if love is strong, if power is kind. It asks if comfort is built on truth or only on the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of pain. And no matter how many answers we give, the paradox waits. Quiet, sharp, unresolved. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is Socratic ignorance. Is it more virtuous to admit ignorance than to claim wisdom? Socrates walked through the city, asking questions. He did not teach. He did not preach. He only asked. He spoke to poets, craftsmen, generals, and lawmakers. He asked them what they knew. They answered with pride. They believed they were wise. But Socrates listened, and then he asked more. Soon their answers fell apart. Their knowledge unraveled. And Socrates said, I do not know either, but at least I know that I do not know. This is the paradox. Socrates claims no wisdom, and yet he is called the wisest. Others claim knowledge, but their knowledge is hollow. Socrates claims ignorance, and his ignorance is called wisdom. So which is greater, to admit ignorance or to believe in your wisdom? If you say you know when you do not, you are a fool. But if you say you do not know, is that not also a kind of knowing? You know the limit. You know the edge. You recognize the darkness where others see light. That, too, is a form of vision. But then it becomes unclear. If knowing that you do not know is wise, then ignorance becomes virtue. But ignorance by itself is not virtue. A person who knows nothing and cares little is not wise. Socratic ignorance is not about having no knowledge. It is about being aware that knowledge is fragile, that certainty is dangerous, that arrogance leads to blindness. So maybe it is not ignorance that is wise, but humility. The kind of humility that asks instead of declares, the kind that doubts instead of insists, the kind that listens more than it speaks. But here is the twist. If everyone claims ignorance, who teaches? Who leads? If no one dares to say, I know, then who builds bridges? Who writes laws? Who cures disease? If Socratic ignorance becomes the rule, does all action stop? Can society be built on questions alone? Or must someone somewhere stand and say, this is true? Does wisdom require confidence, or does it require doubt? The paradox pulls in both directions. Too much confidence is arrogance. Too much doubt is paralysis. You must speak, but you must listen. You must believe, but you must question. You must act, even while unsure. And Socratic ignorance lives in this tension. It does not celebrate ignorance for its own sake. It does not say, knowing nothing is best. It says, beware of thinking you know when you do not. It is a guardrail, not a guide, a warning, not a destination. Still, the problem remains. If admitting ignorance is good, then claiming knowledge becomes suspicious. But if no one claims knowledge, then knowledge disappears. You need both the seeker and the speaker. You need questions and answers. But Socratic ignorance cuts at the answers, testing them, breaking them, challenging them, and sometimes what is left is only silence. Is that silence wise, or is it cowardice? If you always say, I don't know, do you escape error, or do you avoid responsibility? Is it noble to say, I cannot know for sure, or is it a way to never risk being wrong? Maybe admitting ignorance is only virtuous when it is honest, when it leads to curiosity, when it opens the mind instead of closing the mouth. But how do you tell the difference? What about the one who speaks with certainty and turns out to be right? Are they less virtuous than the one who doubted? Is truth less worthy when it is spoken with confidence? Or does virtue live only in the doubt? Now the paradox turns. Imagine a world where everyone is Socratic. Everyone says, I do not know. No one claims truth. No one teaches. No one leads. Questions pile on questions. Doubts stack like bricks. But no building is made. Nothing rises. Is that world wiser than ours? Or imagine the opposite, a world of certainty. Every person speaks with total belief. No hesitation, no doubt. Every voice declares truth, but some of that truth is false. Some of it causes harm. Some of it blinds. Is that world better? Socratic ignorance seems to walk between these two. It says, I will speak, but carefully. I will think, but not assume. I will question, and never stop. But that path is hard. It is slow. It requires strength to admit weakness. It requires clarity to see confusion. It is not for those who want easy answers. So the paradox becomes personal. When you speak, are you pretending to know? When you listen, are you truly open? Do you admit ignorance because you seek truth, or because you fear being wrong? Socratic ignorance is not just a phrase. It is a challenge. It asks you to look at what you believe and ask why. It asks you to doubt not to destroy, but to understand. It asks you to be small, not to be weak, but to be honest. And still, the paradox remains. If all you do is question, when do you build? If all you see is ignorance, how do you move forward? Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living, but the endlessly examined life may never be lived. At some point, you must act. At some point, you must say, I believe this is right, even if you know it might be wrong. So maybe the answer is not to stay in ignorance, but to begin there, to admit what you do not know, not to stop learning, but to start it, to doubt, not to freeze, but to move carefully, to speak, not with certainty, but with awareness. And that is the paradox. Socratic ignorance is both a limit and a beginning, a weakness and a strength, a refusal to lie and an invitation to grow. It is not the end of wisdom. It is the first step, and the wisest thing you may ever say is, I do not know, but I want to understand. Here is another paradox. This one is the Predestination Paradox, Stoic fate. If all is fated, how can any action be free? The Stoics believe the universe runs on reason. Everything happens for a reason. Everything follows a cause. Nothing is random. Every event, every word, every step is part of a chain that stretches from the beginning of time to the end. This chain cannot be broken. It cannot be changed. It is fate. What will happen must happen. What you do tomorrow is already written. What you avoid today was already avoided in the plan of the cosmos. Nothing escapes the path set by nature. But if everything is fated, then what about choice? What about action? What about will? If you decide to move your hand, was that your choice, or just another link in the chain? If you choose to speak, was that freedom, or just the sound of fate unfolding? The paradox opens like this. If all is fated, then everything is necessary. If everything is necessary, then nothing is free. And if nothing is free, then how can we speak of responsibility? How can we say someone should have done otherwise, if otherwise was never possible? You want to believe you are free, that your choices matter. that your actions are yours. But fate says otherwise. It says what you do is already decided. You feel like you choose, but that feeling too was fated. The Stoics say you should align with nature, accept your fate, love your fate, amor fati. But if you are meant to accept your fate, then even your acceptance is not free. If you resist it, that too was destined. Even rebellion is part of the script. So how can there be virtue? How can there be wisdom? How can there be good action if all action is already chosen by the stars? Suppose a man throws a stone. The stone flies, hits the ground. No one blames the stone. The stone has no will. It obeys gravity. It follows cause and effect. But if you are just another stone in the sky of fate, why should anyone blame you? Why should anyone praise you? The paradox grows. You say, but I feel free? Yes, but feeling free and being free are not the same. A puppet might feel free if it never sees the strings, but the strings are still there. You might try to escape. You might say fate and freedom can live together. That fate determines the path, but you choose how to walk it. But that's still fate. If the way you walk was already written, then it was never yours. The choice was part of the plan. You do not escape fate by choosing. You only play your role. Some say fate is like a river. You cannot stop the flow, but you can swim or sink. But who decides how you swim? Your will? But your will is shaped by your past, by your nature, by the universe. So even your struggle is part of the current. The Stoics might say, freedom is understanding. Freedom is knowing that you cannot change the world, only your mind. But if your mind is fated, then even your understanding is not free. Even your wisdom is a step you were always going to take. Then what is freedom? Is it an illusion? A dream made by the gods to keep us moving? Or is it a name we give to the feeling of agreement with fate? The paradox does not stop. If a man kills another, was it fated? Yes. Then is he guilty? If it was meant to happen, how can he be blamed? If he could not have done otherwise, what is justice? What is punishment? But if he is not guilty, then is nothing wrong. If fate explains all, does it excuse all? The Stoics say we must live according to reason, that virtue lies in accepting fate. But if we must accept, and we do, then did we choose to be virtuous? Or was virtue assigned to us by the stars? And if someone fails, if they give in to rage or fear, was that failure also part of the plan? Then how can they be lesser? If fate writes both the hero and the coward, is there a real difference? You might say, the universe is a play. We are actors. Fate gives the roles, but we must perform them well. But can an actor be blamed for a role he didn't choose? Can a tragedy be blamed on the character if the script gave him no other lines? The Stoics say yes, because acting well means playing your role with dignity. But if that dignity was also fated, then it is not your triumph. It is the universe's. And so the paradox tightens. Freedom is responsibility, but fate removes freedom. Yet the Stoics say fate includes responsibility, that even if you are not free, you are still accountable. But how? If you were fated to lie, how can you be told to speak truth? If you were fated to suffer, how can you be told to endure bravely? Maybe the Stoics answer, you are not free from fate, but you are free in fate. That freedom is not in avoiding the path, but in walking it willingly. But if your willingness is written too, then it is not yours. Then maybe freedom is a word for peace, for the soul that does not fight what it cannot change. But peace is not the same as liberty. And the paradox is not about peace. It is about whether choice is real. So the question stays, if all is fated, what is left of you? If every thought, every move, every desire is already known, are you a person or a page in a cosmic book? If fate is total, then nothing is up to you. If nothing is up to you, then all talk of effort, struggle, courage, choice is false. But if even that conclusion was fated, then your doubt was fated too, and that is the paradox. If fate rules all, then you are free to do only what fate has written. And if you believe that, or even if you don't, it was never your decision. It was always written. Diodorus Cronus's master argument. Diodorus Cronus quietly dropped a paradox that detonates our understanding of free will. He claimed that only what is inevitable can truly be possible. If something is possible, it must eventually happen. But if it never happens, it was never really possible in the first place. You didn't become an astronaut. You couldn't have. You didn't marry your first love. That was never on the table. Every missed opportunity wasn't a missed opportunity at all, just a ghost of something that was never going to be real. Now here's the part that locks you in. If that's true, then everything that happens was the only thing that could have ever happened. There are no alternate futures, no choices, no branching paths, just the illusion of movement through a single, frozen outcome. You're not steering the ship. You're just a passenger watching the ride you were always going to take. Free will becomes a memory trick. Your imagination paints forks in a road that was always a straight line. And worst of all, that moment right now where you think, that can't be true, was inevitable too. Empedocles' eternal return of parts. Empedocles saw everything not as a whole, but as parts mixing and unmixing across eternity. According to him, the universe is made from 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water, constantly shuffled by the cosmic forces of love and strife. That might sound poetic until you realize what it means for you. You're not one person. You're a temporary arrangement. Your soul, your quirks, your mind, it's just a brief recipe thrown together by chance. You aren't a self. You're a system. And when you die, those parts scatter, but they don't disappear. They dissolve back into the universe, waiting to be reused. Your curiosity might show up in a poet centuries from now. Your sadness might haunt a soldier in another era. Your laughter could be born in someone who has never known your name, not as reincarnation of the whole, but as fragments. The paradox sits in silence. If your identity is just a momentary harmony, then what exactly do you call you? And if you were never a single thing, can you ever return? Maybe you were never here at all. Just a symphony played once. Carneades' suspended judgment. Carneades stood in front of a crowd and delivered a speech defending justice as a sacred law of nature. The next day, he gave a second speech, this time arguing that justice was nothing but a human invention, created out of fear and self-interest. Both speeches were flawless. Both were completely opposite, and both made sense. Carneades didn't believe in truth. He believed in argument. For every belief, he showed there was a counter-belief just as strong. For every reason to act, there was a reason to hesitate. This wasn't cynicism. It was a deep, deliberate paralysis of certainty. If every idea has an equal and opposite force, how can belief even exist? If you can't trust the truth of one idea without knowing you could be convinced of its opposite, then what do you actually believe? Carneades proposed a radical response: suspend judgment. Don't choose sides. Don't claim to know. Just float above it all, balanced in neutrality. But here's where the trap tightens. Can you live without belief? Can you love someone without believing in love? Can you fight for anything without believing it matters? To trust logic is still to believe in something. To choose neutrality is to choose a side. In the end, you can't escape belief. Even believing nothing is still a belief. Anaximander's boundless origin. Before time had shape, before gods had names, Anaximander looked into the beginning of everything and said it came from something he called the apeiron, the boundless. Not a place, not a being, not a force. The apeiron is what has no definition, no edge, no limit. It is the origin of all, and yet it cannot be described. The moment you try to explain it, it slips away, because to define it is to reduce it, and by definition, it cannot be reduced. Here's the paradox. Everything comes from the aperon, but the aperon itself can never be known. It gives birth to all that is measurable, while being beyond measure itself. It contains all opposites, yet is none of them. Time comes from it, but it does not exist in time. So how can something that cannot be named or touched or seen or imagined be more real than the world around you? Anaximander believed that the world unfolds from this infinite source and then eventually collapses back into it, over and over again. You are part of that unfolding, and someday you will return to the unshaped, the undefined, the unknowable. But what does it mean to return to something you've never known, to dissolve into something that has no center? The paradox is not just where you came from, it's what you've been this whole time.